On December the 3rd, I tested positive for COVID. I was to the point where I really couldn't even walk.
She was admitted to the Tupelo Hospital. That's where she remained for 82 days.
That was the first time they told Reggie he could come see me.
I nearly lost my wife. I mean, that's real. There ain't no false information. And I don't want to see you lose a loved one.
Sponsored by Delta Health Alliance. Go to getyourshotms.org.
Do around here. And there we go. We got that set up. And we are running there as well. All right. I don't know what the heck I'm doing here, but we're going to make it work. We are going to make it work tonight. And who else has joined us in the chat room? We're good in the chat room so far. That's good. Wow. Let's turn down that level a little bit. Let's go 70, 79. There we go. And we got about 25 seconds. Trinitro, how are you? Sensational Sherry. Nice to see you again. Look at that little guy. New grandson there. The gorgeous Sonia's News has returned. And remember, the Super Chat is open. It's a great way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis. Thank you to all the veterans who are tuning on in. We're going to rock here in just a few seconds. So sit back, relax, High Gorgeous Oracles, and do me a favor, get your horns up, because it's time to rock. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. All right, let's hop right on to it. Steve Ward is here. He's been fascinated with the unexplained for over half a century. There were two events that really caught his attention growing up. In Michigan, it was March of 1966 when the big UFO flap literally occurred over his backyard. But it wasn't until November of 1966 that really hooked, lined, and sinkered him into the world of the woo. And that happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where the Mothman and its legend was born. He's been influenced by John Keel and the work of Jacques Vallée. Steve's views on UFOs became unconventional and moved more towards a paranormal explanation. He has visited Point Pleasant numerous times in his research and even dabbled in a little bit of Dogman as well. I mean, this man is into everything, and we're going to get to him right now here on Spaced Out Radio. Steve Ward, how you doing, my friend?
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Dave. Looking forward to it.
We're very much looking forward to having you here as well. 50 plus years of studying this weird stuff, man. I mean, that's a long time to be in the world of the woo.
Yeah, it is. I've always been, I've had maybe one weird experience. I'm not one of these people that is an experiencer. As you know, you have many people on the show that had something happen when they were young. Maybe they grew up in a haunted house or whatever, and it pulled them into this. I was a kid that was interested in science fiction and that sort of thing. Eventually, I came across the great anthologies of Frank Edwards. Remember that guy? He was a news reporter, a journalist. He became very intrigued by UFOs. He was a good friend to Donald E. Kehoe, Major Kehoe, who was the head of NICAP back then, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. Well, Frank Edwards wrote these great anthologies called Strange World, Strangest of All. And it's the first time I read about things like the Flatwoods Monsters or the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblins. The first time I ever heard anything about Bigfoot was in the chapters of one of his books, and the chapter was called The Monster Apes of Oregon. And I don't think he used the word Bigfoot, probably Sasquatch, but he was an early influence before this great wave of UFO sightings occurred, not just in Michigan, but throughout the Midwest in March of 1966. And there were a lot of very credible people that saw these things, police officers and so forth. And there was, I grew up in the Detroit area, and all around there, Ann Arbor, Dexter, Hillsdale, people were seeing these things, sometimes landings. There was a famous one on the Frank Manor Farm in Dexter, which is just outside of Ann Arbor. And Dr. Hynek, Dr. J. Allen Hynek at that time, was attached to Project Blue Book. And while he had, in recent years, started to begin to believe that this was really something legitimate, because Hynek was an astronomer, Northwestern University. He was hired by Blue Book as kind of a debunker. But as time went on, he found that so many of these witnesses were credible, and so many of the sightings. So he was there on the ground when all this happened. And Gerald Ford, who was a senator back then, became incensed at the way the Air Force was not taking this seriously. So originally, actually, Dr. Hynek asked them if they wanted him to go and investigate. They said, no, don't worry about it. And then the senator stepped in, and they sent him there the next day. So it was great. I was a kid in junior high. So all this stuff is going on in the newspapers and the TV. And so, unfortunately, I didn't have any wheels to play UFO investigator, but it was a really great time.
I want to ask you, because I am always interested in finding out these answers from people who've been doing this for more than half a century or 40 years or more. How much has the game changed since you were in it? I mean, back when you got started, you had to do everything by whatever the newspapers told you and by letter. And then you were probably waiting weeks and weeks for information to come in, even if it was talking to another researcher just to get their phone number. And yet today, everything is at the click of a button. I realize how much easier it is today, obviously. But what was it like back then, digging into this realm?
Well, we didn't have the internet, of course, but we did have, the 70s, for example, was a great time to be walking into a bookstore. You had all kinds of magazines devoted to UFOs and the unexplained. So that was a pretty great resource. And you just don't have that many print magazines anymore. Excuse me. You also had something called the UFO News Clipping Service, which unfortunately, it's been a few years since they've been publishing. But what they did was it started, I think it was Lucius Farish out of Arkansas that started it, and it changed hands a couple times. But they would gather, newspaper clipping services can be pretty expensive, but they would pull in all these UFOs and paranormal sightings, newspaper clippings, and they would put them in a format where for $5 a month, you would get a section on UFOs. It included a foreign section for reports all over the world, and also a Fordian section, i.e. Charles Ford. So that was a great resource. And the one thing about that was, every once in a while you would hear people say, well, we haven't heard much about UFOs for a while. Maybe they're not coming here anymore. Well, the mainstream media only would pick up a major UFO story every once in a while. I mean, you've got the Phoenix Lights, you've got in Chicago, the airport. I can't think of the name of the airport.
O'Hare Airport incident.
O'Hare, the famous sighting there. Every once in a while, they would pick up something. But if you subscribe to the newspaper UFO news clipping service, you would find these things are going on all the time. It's just that they would seldom get beyond the local newspaper. So this phenomena is continuous. And while the internet is a great resource, I miss the days of being able to walk into those bookstores. I have quite a collection here of that old stuff that I can use as a resource. and also, many books from that era too. But the other thing that's changed is, and a lot of researchers have said this, we don't see as much in the way of what we would call metallic craft touching down and so forth. Much of it seems to have changed to light ball phenomena, orbs, if you will, but not dust orbs from a digital camera, but real light phenomena and strange things where the balls of light would separate and rejoin or whatever. So there's still the old classic UFOs every once in a while. But for example, Ted Phillips, who was a colleague of Dr. Hynek, Ted Phillips was involved in what they called close encounters of the second kind, which dealt with evidence, physical evidence, landing marks, burn marks, burnt branches, effects on people, conjunctivitis, eye burn, and so forth. He investigated thousands of cases like that. Well, he discovered an area that he dubbed Marley Woods, and it was in the south east corner of Missouri. Now, Ted Phillips, unfortunately, is no longer with us. But he was one of these people like me that he did all kinds of investigations, much more than I ever have. And but then he got a line on this area in Missouri, and he was actually there on the ground watching some of this phenomena take place. Now, there was also strange cryptids seen there. People had missing time and so forth. But he remarked how so much of the aerial phenomena, if you will, had kind of changed from the classic flying saucer to balls of light and so forth. Again, there's always been a variety of different manifestations, or whatever you want to call them. But but things have changed a bit. The other thing for me is, back in the 60s, I was very content with the idea that these entities, or whatever they were coming from other planets and landing here, and you're taking soil samples and so forth, and occasionally giving one of us a ride or an unscheduled medical exam. But being introduced to John Keel was one of the early ones to discover that there seems to be connections between all of these things, cryptids, UFOs, psychic phenomena. He discovered that people were experiencing the same physical symptoms, conjunctivitis, different kinds of ailments and so forth, whether they experienced a cryptid or some kind of a craft. And he found many other connections. But I wasn't happy about that at the time. I read his book. Well, early on I read Strange Creatures from Time and Space, which has been retitled The Guide to Mysterious Beings, and it's in trade paper size. That's where he first introduced the idea of window areas, trying to come to grips with why is it that these things, Bigfoot or whatever, seem to sort of pop in, scare the hell out of people, leave footprints, and then they're gone. But then a little bit later, he wrote a book called Operation Trojan Horse, which is sort of the granddaddy of his belief system. This is before the Mothman prophecies. Excuse me a second. And it was in Trojan Horse. I wasn't, in fact, a friend of mine and I were kind of bad-mouthing the book before we even read it, because, we thought, what's Keel doing connecting all this together? Because we were kind of happy with our comfort zone. We had this paradigm where UFOs were separate, their own thing. Maybe there were cryptids out there, that was something separate. And, ghostly phenomena or poltergeist phenomena was again separate. But Keel really demonstrated that, and other really researchers have demonstrated that it really is all connected.
It really is, and yet everybody wants to keep these phenomena segregated, Steve. Obviously you seem to have learned early on that there was connection between everything through the research that you were doing. Why do you think so many researchers out there fail to find that path?
I don't know. I guess I look at myself because I wasn't happy with the idea at first either. And I had to, but the more people listen to the important, when I get up and I do some speaking, I get up on my soapbox and I preach that we need to listen to the experiencers. We need to listen to what they're telling us. Of course, we're always trying to assess the credibility of these people. But if we go in with preconceived ideas, and in fact, I was just mentioning Stan Gordon off the air.
Good man. Very good man.
Stan, yeah, excellent. I was reading his stuff back in the 70s in UFO Report. And so we're about the same age. So we can make each other feel old, I guess. But, he early on, he made the connection between, he did that there was that great wave in 73 and 74 in southwest Pennsylvania with very strange Bigfoot-like creatures and UFOs, strange lights and so forth, which just doesn't fit well with people. But so, no matter how you look at it, if you listen, what I was getting at earlier, Stan told me that now he's done a lot more investigating than I have, one-on-one interviews. And he would talk to some people that had been with other investigators, and they say they were asking about the Bigfoot they saw. And they said, well, you know what? I also saw this strange light land. No, don't want to hear about your UFO. I want to know about Bigfoot. And vice versa. Sometimes people wanted to hear about, they didn't want to hear them. You saw Bigfoot. I don't care about that. I want to hear about the spacecraft from Alpha Centauri. So there's a lot of that out there. And, if people would look at, take Ron Moorhead. Ron Moorhead is the one that he and his team went out to the Sierra Nevadas with Alan Berry, the skeptical journalist who became a believer. And they captured the great Sierra sounds of Bigfoot, the Sierra Sounds, they called them. He believed at first that Bigfoot was a flesh and blood creature. But then, and he wrote his first book, Voices in the Wilderness. But as time went on, he would find that batteries would drain from his tape recorders and the camera. They would see strange lights in the woods. And Alan Berry, when he was still alive, began to see this as well. But he didn't want Ron Moorhead to talk about that aspect. He thought it's hard enough to get the scientific community to believe that Bigfoots are a real unknown animal. Let's not add the weird stuff. But once Alan Berry passed, Ron Moorhead felt that he was free to come forth. He wrote, the next book was Quantum Bigfoot. He's talking about quantum mechanics and these things, the way they sort of phase in and phase out. Tom Powell, another Bigfoot researcher, went through the same process. Jacques Vallée originally thought that UFOs were strictly nuts and bolts craft. But, if you follow the reports, if you follow the experiences, not only do you find these connections and so forth, but there are so many interesting patterns and parallels with so many of these areas. You and I were talking a little bit off the air about these high strangeness areas, like where the Mothman was seen. There were all kinds of stuff going on around there. And, the Skinwalker Ranch is in the news a lot. There are many, many of these areas of high strangeness or portals, whatever you want to label them, where these things all happen at the same place, and they must be connected somehow. There must be some kind of a common denominator.
I will tell you that we were in the forest here in British Columbia back in 2018 where we actually heard the talking, and it wasn't until 8 months later I put it together, and it was almost exact to what we were hearing on the Sierra Sounds.
Wow, sort of that, they call it sometimes sort of like a...
Samurai chatter.
Yeah, samurai chatter.
Yes.
And also Sally Shepard Wolford. She's the mother of Autumn Williams, another famous Bigfoot researcher. She wrote a book called Valley of the Skookum. And it covered, was like about 1973 to 1976. And that's when Autumn was about 3 to 6 years old. And she talked about all the, they saw in your face, flesh and blood Bigfoots. She would hear that kind of chatter at night near the cabin. And, some of their trash cans would be knocked over and so forth. But they were also seeing things like classic flying saucers, strange orange orbs following cars. There were even men in black showed up, some really weird dudes knocking on doors in this area. And some of the Bigfoots seem to glow at night, and some seem to be translucent. It just gets crazy.
It really is. As we got about 4.5 minutes to go before we got to go to break at the bottom of the hour. Steve Ward is our guest tonight. Steve, let's go back into your story here. As we, when we come back from the break on the other side, we're going to get heavily into Mothman. What made you fall in love with this story?
Well, it was that March '66. The following November, the same year, there was this crazy report that came across the wire services. It went all over the world about this, and this is even before Mothman got a name. This winged humanoid chased two couples down Route 62, just north of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And, as a kid, I just thought that was pretty cool. A little bit later on, I heard James Mosley. He was the editor of Saucer News, which was one of the publications of the time. He was being interviewed on the old Joe Pine show. And for those who don't know who Joe Pine was, he was the great, probably the first shock jock. And he was pretty rough on his guests. But James Mosley was talking about the Mothman. And then, of course, John Keel started writing about it years before he actually published the book, The Mothman Prophecies, which tells a good part of the story. So it was just very intriguing because of all the... I was the guy that was there when the Mothman Prophecies came out in hardcover with the dust jacket. It didn't sell very well when it came out, but I knew that baby was coming out. I had already been through Operation Trojan Horse. I had been gone through, a ritual of fire in changing my thinking. And I couldn't wait to get my hands on that book. And the next year, I took my first visit to Point Pleasant.
Interesting. So for you, as you decided to make that trek to Point Pleasant, did you feel a calling or a pull that was leading you there?
I just, you read a book sometimes and you have...
At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more.
Brought to you by Noggin. Need a little extra help building your child's math and reading skills? Their favorite characters from Nick Jr. shows like Paw Patrol, Bubble Guppies, Blue's Clues, and Blaze are here to help.
Let's get to work!
And they're in Noggin, the smart and fun learning app, where activities are designed to grow the skills your child needs to succeed in school and in life. Fabulous! What's even more fabulous is that you can claim a limited time holiday offer of 99 cents a month plus taxes for 3 months by visiting noggin.com/iHeart. Start your free trial today. $7.99 a month plus taxes until you cancel after free trial ends. Visit noggin.com for terms and conditions.
To see the area. I didn't have much time. And I was visiting some friends south of Buffalo, New York. So I drove down that, must have been Sunday, and found the Low Hotel, quite by accident, in Point Pleasant. I had a map. I kind of knew where I was going. I was going to go out to what they call the TNT area, where they first saw this thing. We can talk more about that later. But I just had this strong desire to see the area, and I just kind of put a vision to it, images to what I had read in the book.
As you were going into West Virginia and decided to go to Point Pleasant, we got about 90 seconds to go here before we got to go to break. Did you feel that you were, going to see something? Did you just feel it's like when disasters happen or when something big happens, people just feel they need to go to that place or that area where an event took place just to feel it for themselves? Is that kind of what you were going through, or were you on a mission to try and get information?
It was information. I remember having kind of, I don't want to call them butterflies in my stomach, but I was doing this alone, and I didn't really know what I was going to find. But I wasn't going to talk to anybody, because this was only 10 years after the bridge tragedy, and we can talk about that later too. But at the end of these events, 13 months to the day when the couples had that first sighting, the Silver Bridge collapsed and 46 people lost their lives. I didn't want to talk to somebody about the Mothman, like a fanboy or something like that, when perhaps they had lost a relative or a friend on the bridge.
And there was a number of people who died in that incident back then. And, it's still celebrated to this day, but more of a tourism attraction now in Point Pleasant than it is about, the macabre aspect of the funeral or the multiple funerals that kind of went along with that event.
Right. They do have a remembrance ceremony every year now. And I went to the 50th back in 2017. And actually, the next day, I met one of the survivors, a truck driver that went down on the bridge and survived to tell the story.
Wow. We're going to get you to hang on there. We're going to get more into Mothman, the history, and what you've seen and learned over the years regarding the Mothman and the legend of this incredible story. All right, we are going to make sure that we have a good time tonight with all of our audience. Our guest, Steve Ward, Mothman, Dogman. He's been an cryptid and UFO investigator for over 50 years. We're going to pick his brain on the Mothman when we return on Spaced Out Radio. All right, we're clear.
Okay.
Hey, space travelers. This is John Resig, founder of the...
We're clear. That was a good half hour. Nice warm up there.
This stuff, you start at a point and it can go off in all kinds of directions. It's not lateral. It has ripples that go everywhere.
It's going to be amazing. I look forward to this. What's that poster you have in there behind you?
They're tributes and spoofs of the old UFO report, like we were just talking about.
Oh, nice.
I made it, it's a mock magazine cover. And this one was geared toward the Van Meter Visitor Festival. I made another one geared toward the Mothman Festival and another one toward the Butler Conference. So what it is it looks like, if you at first glance, it'll look like the old UFO magazines of the 70s. But I've got a bunch of names in here and a bunch of spoofs and like Bray Road Tours, for example.
Yeah, nice.
Dial 1-800-GER, all right? And all my friends are in here being poked fun at. And I come up with different ideas and
those are awesome. You need to put those on the market.
Well, what I've done was I can they're pieced together. Each section I have several pieces of, so it takes a while, but I can piece several of them together. I have distributed. I have Jeff Wamsley. Yeah. He's got one. His daughter has one, and her husband. Several people, and of course, some of the people that I have poked fun at in there, they've got one too. So, and I hope to do some more. I'd like to. It takes a long time to put them together, and of course, color copiers are my friend when I do it. I use vinyl stick-on lettering because nice. I'm not adept at. I'm not a draftsman where I can do this perfect.
Yeah, me neither, man. Me either.
But it takes a long time with little tweezers, and it's fun getting the image of what I want to do, and then figuring out how to do it. I turned a couple guys that wrote the Van Meter Visitor. Made them look like Men in Black.
Oh, perfect.
Dastardly Men in Black, but they have been silenced. Was the article?
Kaiju is asking if you could show the Amazing Stories one right on your left.
Yeah. This is one I made quite a few years ago, and I made a model, kit bashing from every different models. That's me. That's a two-dimensional cutout of me balancing on the wing, and it's supposed to be me escaping from Atlantis while it's blowing up. So I borrowed from calendars and made the thing myself. And
that looks awesome.
There's three-dimensional elements and two-dimensional elements. This was made about 25 years ago, I think. So
that is wicked.
And I love the old. I collect the old Amazing Stories, I spoke about the Shaver mystery at the Van Meter Visitor Festival. If you remember, Richard Shaver started hearing voices on his welding torch and claimed they were from the evil Darrow that lived deep beneath the earth. And they would send these rays out from their ancient mechanisms to it was kind of another devil theory. They would create car crashes and make people stab each other and so forth.
All right, my friend, we got 1 minute.
Okay.
I'm glad the audio is working tonight.
It sounds really good on my end.
Yeah, I had to reroute everything here. Had to my major mixer that I had is now a $2,500 paperweight.
Wow.
Yeah, so had to reroute everything, and I think we got it cleaned up tonight. So that's working. It's nice and clear, which is good. All right, we got about 30 seconds. I just want to say thank you to Smithy for kicking off the Super Chat tonight. It's a great way to support what we do on this show on a nightly basis, so thank you very much to those who hit up on the Super Chat. Thank you to all our new subscribers as we're encroaching already on 14,100. All the veterans out there, like our buddy Veteran Surf Jer, much love. You always have a safe home here on Spaced Out Radio. For all our veterans, we love you. And to all our regulars, let's get ready. Here comes the second half hour. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you miss portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading up on Shirky Poo's News Wire, and checking out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on with the cryptid talk as we're shifting gears, going right into Mothman and the prophecies and legends that go along with this strange creature. Giving us the history lesson right up to present is Steve Ward. And Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here, Dave. A lot of fun.
All right, let's go back to 1966. Let's take a brief history lesson here for those who may not know the full legend of the Mothman and the prophecies that went along with that. Fire away, 1966.
November 15th, 1966. The Scarberries and the Mallets. There were two married couples, and they were cruising through an area called the TNT area. Now, this it's now the McClintock Wildlife Area, but back in the 40s, it was a. If you look at you can find the old black and white photographs online. It was a huge complex where they made TNT. They made with munitions for the World War II effort, and what they would do is store them in these concrete bunkers. The locals just call them igloos. They're like concrete igloos. There was 100 of them. And what they would do is they would have foliage growing all over them. So if, God forbid, the enemy got that far into the U.S., they could fly over them, and it would just look just like terrain. They wouldn't know that all kinds of munitions and explosives were stored there. Well, long abandoned, even in the 60s. This place is, if you go there in the daytime, it's creepy as hell. If you go there at night, it's really creepy. And I, during the Mothman Festival, I'm one of the tour guides, and they take three tractors and they pull three carts and through the TNT area, and it's a little bit set up like a Halloween hayride. A guaranteed fly over the Mothman with great special effects, but it's really quite an experience to go out there. And back in the old days, you could drive in there. You can't do that now. All the roads are blocked off. You can walk in, but so they were actually. It was a it was sort of a lover's lane out there. And the Scarberries and the Mallets who go out there and have a little fun sometimes sneak up behind a couple in a warm embrace and flash their headlights on them. So anyway, they didn't find anybody they were looking for, and they were going by the Old North Power Plant, and they saw something, some kind of a shadow, an image, something, and they got closer, and it was humanoid. It had wings. Linda Scarberry said it looked like one of its wings was caught in the fence. And the really striking part of it was it had these piercing red glowing eyes, not eye shine, but something that seemed to generate its own light. And they decided to get the hell out of there. They took off, but it followed them. They said it flew through the air, keeping pace with their car. And they came down into Point Pleasant. They did stop at the police station and gave the report. The police chief said that he'd known these kids all their life. They seemed to be genuinely frightened. If you go to the Mothman, now Jeff Wamsley, who was the co-founder of the Mothman Festival, which is every third weekend in September, he's also created this just wonderful museum, the Mothman Museum. It is so well done. There's great merchandise there. There's nothing cheap about it. I mean, it's just very high quality. He has memorabilia from the film, The Mothman Prophecies, but he also has all these articles of all the occurrences, of all the reports at the time, including Mary Hyer's column, Where the Waters Mingle. Mary Hyer was the reporter that became a friend and colleague of John Keel, and they would go down south of there and watch the strange lights go over every night. But you also will find the original written report from the couples that saw this thing, and so it is just so well put together. Now, of course, this hit the wire services. It wasn't called Mothman right away. We don't know who came up with the term, but the TV show Batman was popular at the time. So somebody just made a play on that because whatever this thing was, it didn't look anything like a moth. It had a wingspan of about roughly 10 feet. It was about 6-7 foot tall, roughly humanoid. The thing is that I'll go a little bit more on with the story, but early on you can see that the Mothman was a paradox. A 10-foot wingspan probably wasn't enough to lift something that big, although it did take off. It didn't always flap its wings. People would see it standing there, put its wings behind it, and take off straight up like a helicopter. Doesn't make any sense. In some cases, it seemed to leave some kind of a footprints. John Keel saw these skinny little footprints around the Old North Power Plant.
And sorry for cutting you off there. Yes. What did those footprints look like?
He didn't give much of a description. They were just kind of long and narrow. The thing is, he found other footprints there, which kind of reflect more on what's going on today. He found, and I didn't catch this at first. He found these large dog-like footprints in the same area, and he said whatever it was making this had to be really heavy because they were pressed in so deep. He was guessing something that was 300 or 400 pounds. It sounds like a 6-foot dog man, He also found there was another, I was mentioning before off air, these things don't happen in a vacuum. It's like you've got the Mothman and hitting the water, and then you've got all these ripples of all these other things that happen at the same time. I just lost my train of thought there. What did you just ask me?
Oh, just in regards to the footprints, what they look like.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. He also, there was a really bizarre sighting closer to Charleston of a sort of a retro UFO. So it's kind of classic saucer shape. A guy named Tad Jones saw it on his way to work in Cross Lanes, and it had rods that sort of came down, something like caster wheels on the bottom and a propeller on the bottom. Now, what the hell is this thing? And some kind of an old, drone or something. And so he sees this thing. John Keel goes out to investigate. He finds the same weird Mothman-like footprints, if there was Mothman, and he also finds these large dog-like footprints. He consults with Ivan Sanderson. Now, most people know who he was. He was the great British naturalist. He was living in New Jersey, friend and colleague of John Keel. He wrote the Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life and many great books on UFOs. He also concurred. He said, we keep finding these footprints, these dog-like footprints, in these paranormal hotspots. And that's mentioned in the Mothman prophecies, but it's frustrating because we don't have any more information than that. I wish these people were still alive so we could, the Dogman phenomenon didn't really come to the forefront until Linda Godfrey started writing about it with The Beast of Bray Road. I heard a report from a professor, retired Wayne State University professor at Michigan MUFON. He talked about his investigation into Bigfoot and UFOs in Michigan. The report wasn't really for public consumption, but one thing he did say that I can share, he said that we keep finding these dog-like footprints in these paranormal hotspots. And I think that happened. We've got these different researchers separated by half a century telling us that these footprints keep showing up. What might that tell us about the Dogman? But back to Mothman. John Keel also got some reports of some people that saw it fairly close, and it sounded like it was making some kind of a humming noise or motor noise or something, as if it was mechanical or maybe it was a drone. So how do you piece all these things together? Something that sort of an apparition, sort of a physical entity, maybe mechanical. So many of these things don't seem to make sense. If we listen to the reports, it'd be very easy just to ignore the stuff we don't want to hear. But whatever this thing was, and the other thing that makes it kind of puts it in the realm of the paranormal. John Keel discovered this, but there was also a Swedish researcher whose name escapes me. He was another friend and colleague of John Keel. John Keel went over to Sweden at one time and spent some time with these great researchers. But this one gentleman interviewed even more witnesses of the Mothman than John Keel did. And almost all of them had an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena after they got home.
Weird.
There have been reports of people, having a close proximity with a UFO and maybe nothing else, and also having that kind of an outbreak. What possible connection? You just have to wonder, how is it that, what's the connection? What makes that happen? And it makes it seem that there's something more to Mothman than just an undocumented creature.
So fast forward to today, where we see these creatures popping up in Indiana, in Illinois. Lon Strickler, Butch Wachowski have done a lot of work on these creatures. Eric Altman has also joined in, and we'll get back to the history in a minute. But do you think this is a different creature that we are dealing with today that people are encountering compared to what was happening in 1966?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a little skeptical of some of those sightings. I know I have a couple sources from MUFON that some of the early sightings were coming from the same IP address. So I think we have to be very careful because sometimes there's a mixture of legitimate reports and then reports that are fabricated. But to answer your question, I tend to think that, so many times people will they'll talk about some kind of a winged creature, whatever it is. Well, it's the Mothman. Well, the Mothman, whatever it was, even if it was an apparition of some kind, had kind of a specific look to it. There was the Linda Godfrey investigated what they called the Wisconsin man bat that goes back to I don't remember what year it was, but it's the last 10 or 15 years. And that was something very different. It was like a big, ugly bat. It came very close to the window. The father and son saw this thing. Didn't look like anything they'd ever seen before.
On December the 3rd, I tested positive for COVID. I was to the point where I really couldn't even walk.
She was admitted to the Tupelo hospital That's where she remained for 82 days.
That was the first time they told Reggie he could come see me.
I nearly lost my wife. I mean, that's real. There ain't no false information. And I don't want to see you lose a loved one.
Sponsored by Delta Health Alliance. Go to getyourshotms.org.
From HBO's Insecure and executive producer Issa Rae comes a new satirical true crime podcast, We Stay Looking. After investigating the disappearance of a missing Black woman in Looking for LaToya, Terry J. Vaughn is back as citizen sleuth Rose Cranberry. Through comedy, We Stay Looking sheds light on the serious issues of systemic racism within the media and the criminal justice system. Produced by Radio and Tenderfoot TV with HBO, We Stay Looking is available December 8th on all podcast platforms. You can binge the entire season early, December 1st on HBO Max.
And they both became very ill afterwards. There was some kind of a real negative effect to it. So I think we have to, there was the years ago in the 50s, I think there was the Houston Batman. There are other birds that kind of fall more in the Thunderbird category. So I'm a little hesitant to say it's the same thing. The only report that actually looked a good deal like the Mothman happened almost exactly 3 years before the Scarberries and the Mallets had their sighting in the TNT area. And that we have to go to Kent, England. Kent, England, there were some kids coming home from a dance. They saw a strange light land down behind a grove of trees. And then they saw another light, and it's not clear, but the light may have morphed into this thing. And it shuffled it like the Mothman did. When the Scarberries and the Mallets first saw it, it was kind of shuffling on the ground. This thing did the same thing. This thing didn't look like it had a head. Mothman, the eyes were kind of sunken down in the chest, it seemed, or nobody really got a very good look at it. So that was actually, except they didn't report anything about the eyes. The eyes did not have that red glow, but it was remarkably similar in that one case. So, Keel wasn't sure how physical these things were. He thought perhaps they were temporal or paraphysical, and that they may have all come from the same source. He wasn't that concerned about what the creature looked like or how many portholes the spacecraft had. He thought that perhaps these were transmogrifications of energy. They may have been temporal. If you look at some of these the sightings over the years, there does seem to be kind of a reflective factor. I mean, the airship reports from the late 1800s, and then later on we had some of the strange lights, the ghost planes and the scare ships and so forth, and the Foo Fighters, and then classic UFOs. It was like a lot of these, even some of these strange ghost planes that they were seeing in Sweden. They were these huge planes that would come out of the north, and they would have many propellers, and they shone these big spotlights down to these little villages way up north, and they wonder, where the heck do these things come from? Where would they be refueled or whatever? And it just seems like a lot of these things were, call them manifestations or whatever, were a little bit ahead of where we were scientifically. When we saw these airships, they were like these big dirigibles with lights and wheels and so forth. There wasn't anything really that far advanced. The Zeppelins and that sort of thing, dirigibles, were in the infancy stage. So there's a very strange connection between, I think, our belief and our expectations for some of these. Keel wasn't saying that people were hallucinating. There was a physical reality to these, but there was something very strange about the way they would manifest over the years.
After the incident where the Silver Bridge collapsed, and I believe it killed 46 people, 47 people in there, people had claimed, and the stories start going around that, the Mothman was seen tampering with the bridge or standing on top of the bridge as it collapsed and so on and so forth. And, this is where tall tales kind of come into play because everybody wants an excuse. Did you think that really happened? I
don't, I'm always skeptical because there have been other bridge collapses. And sometimes after the fact, you'll hear, oh, somebody saw this winged creature before. And, I don't know. There was a flash when the bridge collapsed, and some people claimed it was a UFO. Keel believed it was the power cables were breaking, and then there was just an electrical arc. It was the 13th eye bar that failed. It was a defect, and the bridge wasn't really. It was constructed back in the 1920s. It wasn't really meant to carry the traffic of the 1960s, and so the one thing somebody did report to Mary Heyer that they'd seen two men climbing around on the bridge. They were kind of in dress clothes. I mean, didn't have coats on. They had street shoes on and checkered shirts. And maybe there's nothing to that, but there's a really bizarre phenomenon that I first read about it with Keel, and then when I've talked to other people, I found there's something to it. The man in the checkered shirt phenomenon. We hear about these bedroom invaders. In fact, Mothman was a bedroom invader in some cases, which throws another wrench into the physical creature aspect. But Keel would talk about how the people would have these apparitions by their bed, and sometimes it would be a man, and he'd be wearing a checkered shirt. Well, I thought that's weird. And then one time, my wife and I were down south visiting her uncle. He had a lady friend over, and we just, how people get talking about ghost stories and the paranormal. She knew nothing about the literature. And she was talking about how she saw this man at the foot of her bed one night. And then she had this puzzled look on her face. And she said, it was weird. He was wearing a checkered shirt. And I thought, whoa, and that was without any solicitation to try and get that out of her. I think that there are some people that think that Mothman was a harbinger. It was somehow warning about the bridge. Well, I wish these harbingers would be a little clearer about what's going to happen. You see if he was a harbinger and an apparition, how would we? Keel believed something was going to happen, but there were other reasons for it. Mary Heyer and one of the other Mothman witnesses, Mrs. Tomlinson, they were having dreams of packages floating on the river. And of course, this is leading up to Christmas. And of course, that's exactly what happened when the bridge collapsed. John Keel, the Mothman Prophecies is a fascinating book. But excuse me, I want to warn something though, to warn people. The original manuscript, that the editors cut half of it out. There was some tampering with it. There were some mistakes in the Mothman Prophecies. I don't think we can put them all on Keel. There's a couple places where it looks like the editors wanted to make some of the Mothman sightings a little more uniform, because when you see other articles that John Keel wrote about the same incident, it's accurate. In a couple things in the Mothman Prophecies are tweaked a little bit. So it was cut out by half. A lot of that was preserved in his next book, The Eighth Tower. So that was good. But it's just a fascinating story. But he got involved with several people that he called them silent contactees. These people they firmly believed they were in contact with some kind of an entity, like a space brother or whatever. And they had no desire to draw attention to themselves or to tell people about it. They firmly believed they were having this contact. A lot of times they would be given some kind of a goal to achieve, which was unachievable, like trying to find a mysterious cross in Brooklyn. Sometimes they were given prophecies. That's where the title comes from. And sometimes they became true, maybe a plane crash or whatever. But then the big one, the world's going to end. If you go to this hill and gather all your friends together, the Space Brothers will come down and they'll save you.
Of course.
And of course, no Space Brothers. And these people were led along by whatever trickster force this was. So the same thing. Now, at one point, John Keel was in contact with a lot of these people that didn't know each other. And they're talking about some big event. And Keel began to believe it was going to be something about the river, but he thought maybe a factory or something was going to explode. He told Mary Hyre, don't tell anybody about this, because if it does happen, they're going to come to us and think that we had something to do with it. He didn't even think about the bridge. And then they got more and more detailed as time went on. They were saying there was going to be some kind of a big EM effect, whatever that meant. And it was going to happen. Finally, they got the date. It was going to happen December 15th, 1967, the moment President Johnson lit the Christmas tree in Rockefeller Center. And there would be power failures, 3 days of darkness. I think that the Pope was going to be assassinated. That might have been another time. But so by this time, Keel had been so immersed in this and seen some of these things come true, and he was being harassed. There were a lot of a lot of it was actually human intervention. The IRS was messing with him, and the feds apparently. A lot of people don't know this, but at one point he wrote a very critical article on J. Edgar Hoover. A couple of weeks later, he started getting all this harassment. Some of that harassment is detailed in the Mothman prophecies, and it's not paranormal. It's not the Space Brothers. It's the damn government. But so Keel is in his New York apartment. He wasn't in Point Pleasant when the bridge collapsed. He was there. He said he bought it hook, line, and sinker. He was a raving paranoiac, and he's there with in his apartment with extra water and everything.
Steve, I'm going to get you to hold on right there. We're going to continue the Mothman talk when we return with investigator Steve Ward. He's been into cryptids and UFOs for over half a century. This man knows things, and we're glad to have him here on Spaced Out Radio tonight. We'll continue with the Mothman talk and get prophetic next on the Mighty SOR. All right, we're clear.
Good place.
This is good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Banger. I know it's you can rein me in anytime. Like when you start talking about this, it's very easy to take all these detours and meander around because all these things seem to connect.
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it very much. We got about 5.5 minutes.
Okay.
So nice time to relax here.
I can also tell you about the Bill Edmondson, the survivor, if you want, that night on the bridge.
Yeah, we'll get into him for sure.
Okay. See if anything important is going on in my life here. Nope.
Me either. I'm just hanging out doing a radio show.
I have done several shows on Bray Road and the Dogman.
Yes.
Connected one way or the other, and also a lot of weird stuff going on in southern Wisconsin as well. So,
UFO wise or cryptid wise?
Both.
Oh, really?
Mostly cryptid, but like I say, Lee Hampel's farm is just it's just crazy, and this stuff's going on all the time. And if he hadn't put those cameras up, nobody know about it because and you can see the timestamp on some of these things, so you know how quickly some of these things fade in and fade out. Also, he's dropped carcasses there, like deer carcasses or whatever, and you'll see this mist show up, and then sometime later, there'll be another picture, and the carcass is gone, no footprints, no drag marks. He's been chronicling these footprints, 5-toed, a pad, and a heel, and they're all over the place, and they do crazy things like start in the middle of nowhere, or maybe end in the middle of nowhere in the snow. And he's given these photographs to the DNR and experts and so forth. One woman called him a liar, that he's just making this up. Somebody else said that, well, it's a double footprint. He said, well, these footprints are all over the place. How can you have a double footprint to go on for hundreds of yards? It's mind-blowing.
I think there's these little skinwalker farms all over the place.
Yes, absolutely.
My friend in Mission, British Columbia used to live on one.
Really?
They had everything going on there. Our Bigfoot sightings happen there. Our UFO sightings, alien sightings happen there. Ghost sightings, fairies. They had everything going on there. And all the other properties, as far as we knew, were silent. Nobody said a thing. But this one piece of property was just crazy. Crazy.
Well, there are some people around Bray Road that won't talk about this at all. He's got a neighbor that doesn't like him at all and won't. He asked if he could put cameras on her property, and she said some pretty nasty things to him. We won't talk about that on the air. But some of the other people, they were the ones that told him. He said, there's something on your property, and we've seen it, and it's just at this one end of Bray Road.
That's crazy. That is crazy. We got about 2 minutes here.
Okay.
That's just nuts.
And you try to come to grips with we as rational human beings, if that's what we are. Doesn't seem like it, but we try to put it together. A, B, C. And man, it just doesn't make sense. There's a real sort of a trickster element, a mischievous element to so much of this. Allergies.
All right, we got about 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Okay.
Hi, gorgeous Amy Vegas O. How are you? Amy's a fan of yours.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Chad Smith, the Chad Smith, has arrived, people. Oh, hey, Clam. How you doing? Brazelhoff, good to see you. Manuel, no, I haven't seen Carl in a couple of years. Chris Mo in Austria, good morning to you. How are you?
I wonder if my friend Jocko is out there.
Oh, probably somewhere. Probably somewhere. There's 165 watching live right now, so... All right, TMI, good to see you. Smithy, thank you so much for kicking off the Super Chat tonight. It's a great way to support what we do nightly here on Spaced Out Radio, and we appreciate each and every one, so thank you very much. Thank you to all our new subscribers who've hit that subscribe button and rang that bell, and all the veterans who are tuning us in. We appreciate you. Here we go with hour number 2. Horns up, people.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Tentacles. Tentacles is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on with legendary researcher Steve Ward, over 50 years looking into everything from cryptids to UFOs, extraterrestrial contact. Mothman is the topic. Dogman coming up in just a little bit. Steve, welcome back.
Great to be back. Dave, that might be the first time I've been called legendary.
Well, why not? Why not? Nice, nice high and tight beard like that. You totally deserve it, my friend. Totally deserve it. We like a good solid beard around here. I want to ask you before we continue on, do you believe in Mothman?
Yes. There were, John Keel talked to a little over 100 people in that year that saw something. Most of the reports were the same, same general, the dark coloring, about the same size, humanoid, wings, red glowing eyes. Now, there were people, in these areas, these hotspots, people always will see other things. A very famous witness, Tom Urey, and his report is incorrect in the Mothman prophecies. Tom actually saw a thunderbird. This thing had a 10 to 12 foot wingspan, and it was just a giant bird. He said, look, it was not a condor. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. I would take a lie detector test. I was able to meet some of the original witnesses of the Mothman at the Mothman Festival. Jeff was able to get some of them together, and they were at a table. Linda Scarberry, now she's no longer with us, but I was able to talk to her one-on-one. Faye DeWitt, who's not mentioned in the book, she had a close-up sighting of the Mothman, and Tom Urey was there. Now, Tom Urey, there was something. Mary Heyer wrote about his sighting in her column. Now, she got some. I think, if I remember correctly, she implied that it had come from the TNT area or something like that, but it didn't really. She colored it up a little bit, and Tom didn't appreciate that. Now, they were friends, Tom Urey and Mary Heyer, but he told me the story several years ago, about 40 years after the fact, I guess. He said he went in and talked to Mary. He said, "Mary, I ought to kill you," joking, of course. And she said, "Don't worry, Tom. This will all blow over in about 2 weeks." Well, here it is.
From HBO's Insecure and executive producer Issa Rae comes a new satirical true crime podcast, We Stay Looking. After investigating the disappearance of a missing Black woman in Looking for LaToya, Terry J. Vaughn is back as citizen sleuth Rose Cranberry. Through comedy, We Stay Looking sheds light on the serious issues of systemic racism within the media and the criminal justice system. Produced by Radio and Tenderfoot TV with HBO, We Stay Looking is available December 8th on all podcast platforms. You can binge the entire season early, December 1st, on HBO Max.
Brought to you by Noggin. Need a little extra help building your child's math and reading skills? Their favorite characters from Nick Jr. shows like Paw Patrol, Bubble Guppies, Blue's Clues, and Blaze are here to help.
Let's get to work!
And they're in Noggin, the smart and fun learning app, where activities are designed to grow the skills your child needs to succeed in school and in life. Fabulous! What's even more fabulous is that you can claim a limited-time holiday offer of 99 cents a month plus taxes for 3 months by visiting noggin.com/iHeart. Start your free trial today. $7.99 a month plus taxes until you cancel after free trial ends. Visit noggin.com for terms and conditions.
4 decades later, and it had not blown over at all. But the point is that, and he thought, with Tom Urey, when I talked to him, he had not met Linda Scarberry until that day. He had not met Faye DeWitt. We think all these people live in the same area. They all saw the Mothman. They all know each other. It's not true at all. He thought that they were seeing the same thing he did, only they were just so freaked out by it, they colored up the details or just imagined something scarier than a big bird. Well, he was, they made the film, The Mothman Prophecy, in about 2002. And Tom Urey and one of the other witnesses who I never met, Marcella Bennett, she's the one in the Mothman Prophecies where she and her brother went out they'd heard about the Mothman. They were going to go out and try and scare some people that they didn't be home. They weren't home. But she saw this thing rose up off the ground, and she dropped her infant child for a moment.
Oh, my.
The child was all right, but she was so terrified of this thing, and it took off. So Tom Urey and Marcella Bennett were driving out to some kind of some kind of a filming they were going to do in Katanning, Pennsylvania, where they actually doubled for Point Pleasant in the film. And so he said, and he was telling me the story. He said, "Okay, I'll tell you my story. You tell me yours." And after he heard her story, he was convinced that no, they didn't see the same thing he did. They saw something distinctly different, because it wasn't just a matter of imagination. So to answer your question, a little over 100 people saw this thing, very similar. They experienced something, even though it just doesn't make any sense.
All right.
Doesn't flap its wings, took off straight like a helicopter. It generated its own lights with its eyes, had a motor sound in some cases. It just doesn't fit.
Marty wants to know, in your opinion, Steve, what kind of being is the Mothman?
I don't know. Perhaps what we might call an elemental. John Keel used the term ultra-terrestrial, and he used it as kind of a literary device. But the idea was that some of these entities, even some of the ones that we think might come from outer space, that perhaps these things, these images, are a natural condition of the planet. Now, he also would use the term ultra-terrestrial as a synonym for elemental. And elementals, of course, are the little people, the fairies, the leprechauns, the Pan, the Cherokee little people, and on and on. So it fits something more like that. It didn't obey physical laws, yet it seemed to have some physicality. Perhaps Keel was right. Perhaps these were simply some kind of a transmogrification of energy, something temporarily physical. They're almost like something out of a nightmare. There was I saw somebody mentioned earlier on the blurb across the screen that they or a friend of theirs had seen one in their bedroom. Well, a woman named Pat Gray, she spoke at the festival at one time, and I spoke to her one-on-one. She and her husband were missionaries. And when just on the verge of the Mothman wave, they went off to some far-off country as missionaries. But before they went, they had this apparition that looked just like the Mothman, big humanoid thing with wings and red glowing eyes, manifesting right in their bedroom. So they went off for years. When they came back years later, they were completely out of touch with their hometown. Years later, they started reading all these things about the Mothman. They thought, my God, that's what we saw manifest in our bedroom. So another element of the Mothman to make it not permanently physical. So I guess I'm going to have to say it's some kind of a elemental, a thought form, perhaps. It might be. I like the term. Is the Phantom Menagerie. That was coined by Dr. Donald Ullman. He was of the Church of England. He was an exorcist. He actually attempted to exorcise the Loch Ness Monster. That's another great story.
I remember that.
Yes. And he even supposedly exorcised the Bermuda Triangle. So this guy was no slouch, right? But so I guess I will have to say, if I'm going to go out on a limb, some kind of an elemental, perhaps something natural to the planet that we just don't understand. But I'm definitely, John Keel himself wouldn't be able to tell you what the Mothman was. He didn't know.
Very interesting indeed, because, so many people having seen the exact same thing. It's not like a Bigfoot where, some see a dark red, some see a gray, some see a black or a dark brown, or even a blondish, long hair, short hair. Everybody who has seen this creature has continued to see the exact same thing. That's almost unprescribed in the cryptid world.
Well, let me give you something else about Bigfoot. Stan Gordon has run into some of these cases, but the classic one of all time, well, that's an exaggeration, but 66, near Marlington, West Virginia, near the state forest there, a gentleman named W.D. Priestley, Doc Priestley was his nickname, Doc. He's driving along in his car. He's following a hunting bus. He and his buddies are off on an excursion, caravan style. All of a sudden, Priestley's car goes to a stall and just cruises to a stop. He looks over to his left, and there's a classic Bigfoot standing there. And its hair occasionally seems to be standing on end a little bit, like static electricity. So he's agape. He doesn't know how long he's there, but his buddies notice he's not behind him. They turn around, they come back. The Bigfoot sees them coming or hears them coming and recedes back into the woods. Priestley's able to start his car again. So he takes off, and he doesn't tell anybody what happened. He takes off, and all of a sudden, I don't know how far he got, but his car starts to chug, and smoke is coming out of his engine. His engine burns out. What's off to his left again? Either the same Bigfoot or his kissing cousin is standing there in proximity. There are cases where cryptids, the proximity of cryptids, seem to affect the engines of vehicles in the same way that UFOs do. We have many, many cases of a close proximity of some kind of a craft seeming to stall a car. Now, Priestley didn't tell anybody for months later what happened, because he wanted to come back to that area and go hunting. He wanted his buddies to come with him. He wasn't going to tell them that he saw a Bigfoot to scare the hell out of them. So he told them afterwards, after the hunting took place, guess what happened to me? Stan Gordon has chronicled a couple of these, but just to kind of show you that there's these patterns. In 1960, in North Cumberland, England, Dorothy Strong is in a taxi cab. They're cruising along. Taxi cab stalls. What they see is literally a phantom army. And, we've heard of phantom armies in Gettysburg. They pop up in England sometimes and other places. And they're marching toward the taxi cab, which has stalled. The fare meter has gone crazy, and they feel like they're being hit by a force field of something. And as this army comes toward them, they fade out. It doesn't last very long. They dissipate. The taxi cab is able to start again. It was the Battle of Otterburn from 1388. Now, the reason they know that is because this thing has manifested before, and they can tell by the uniforms. They could see them in detail enough to know back in history what this was all about. So here you have a Bigfoot. You have a phantom army, and you have all these cases of UFOs that interact with vehicles somehow. If people can be in a haunted house and an apparition can drain their batteries, I suppose an apparition the size of an army could stall a car. It doesn't, it kind of follows logically. But, and there's even a crazier one if you want to hear it, that deals with the fairies, the little people. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's my favorite vehicle stoppage of all time. Elliot O'Donnell, he was a paranormal investigator of his time. He wrote books in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he had one was called Ghostland. And this story was about his uncle by marriage. And he was driving in a cart with his servant named Dunkley, right? And they're on a haunted road going toward Limerick in Ireland. And all of a sudden, now they're in a horse-drawn carriage, one horse. All of a sudden, the carriage stops dead. The horse is shivering. And Mr. B, who was his uncle, turns around and he sees Dunkley is in a state of, he's in a stupor. He's got a look of terror on his face. Mr. B looks down, he sees these little shadowy forms swarming. And so he grabs the reins, breaks the spell, they take off. They get far enough away, Dunkley comes out of his stupor, and he said, "What happened? What did you see?" In his mind's eye, he saw a troupe of dancing fairies. And apparently when you come upon the fairies making merry, they don't like it. They don't want to be seen. So again, from his viewpoint, these things looked angry. They were climbing on the cart, and they're trying to pull this guy off. So this poor sap was terrified. So again, I don't know if it's a real story or not, but it's interesting. There are so many instances in paranormal experience where people they see something different within the same experience. even Betty and Barney Hill had some interesting differences in their abduction case, while they had a very similar experience. But so that's, I know that going off on these tangents, when I spoke at the Beast of Bray Road conference last October, I was talking mainly about cryptids, but some of the stranger aspects, the high strangeness aspects of cryptids. And every once in a while I'd take one of these detours, and I put the image up there, would be a detour sign, and we'd go off on these crazy patterns, and then we'd come back to the main drag. But that's what's so fascinating about this stuff. You and I talked about early on that these things are all connected. And if you don't have to imagine it, you don't have to force it. But if we listen to the experiences of the experiencer, it just all falls into place.
Sir Wolf is asking about Indrid Cold and the role that Indrid Cold played in this. For people who may not know, who is Indrid Cold and the relevancy to the Mothman story?
Indrid actually showed up a couple days before that major sighting. And Indrid is more of a... Woodrow Derenberger is the man that said he contacted him initially. Or I should say, Mr. Cold contacted him initially. Woodrow Derenberger fits more the contactee mold. You know, we have the abductees where they're taken without any. I mean, they don't have a choice. The classic contactees, like George Adamski, who supposedly contacted the Venusian in the desert in California, and all these guys, including Woodrow Derenberger, it was more of a, we want the contact. We want to go with you. It happened on, earlier November, before the first Mothman sighting. And he was driving on Route 77 near Parkersburg. He was a appliance salesman. He sees this craft. He's on the highway. I guess there's no cars around there at the moment, but he sees this craft. He describes it as kind of a, if you could imagine the chimney of a kerosene lamp, where it's kind of wide in the middle and then tapers at each end. This kind of a craft. At first, when he saw it coming up around him, he thought it was a car, but it wasn't. It came around, it cut him off. He pulled off to the side of the road, and this strange character with his hair slicked back, his arms crossed, pardon me, in some kind of coveralls, told that his name was Cold. He didn't have a first name at that time. And he had this pointless conversation about, he asked him what the lights were up ahead, and Derenberger said, well, it's a city. And he said, well, we call those gatherings. And it was if this guy was really a visitor from space, it was one of the most mundane, boring conversations you could possibly have. And then he said, I will see you again. He gets in his craft and he takes off. Supposedly, there were other witnesses that saw this man and saw the craft there. As the story unfolds with Derenberger, he gets, as with many of the contactees, while there may have been an initial experience that was real or had some reality, he seemed to embellish later on. He wrote a book called Visitors from Langulos, and he seemed to embellish a lot of the, supposedly he went to the planet Langulos, and the whole trip only took an hour and a half. On the other hand, there's more to the story, because before Woodrow Derenberger had a story, and he went to the newspaper, he went to the police, it was interviewed on TV and so forth. A few days before that, Mary Heyer had this man come to him. Wasn't come to her. It wasn't Derenberger, and he told almost exactly the same story. He and his buddy were traveling on Route 77. This spaceship came down. They talked to this guy. Didn't get a name of this entity, and and that was that. And he was going to come forward with it. He was going to talk about it in the news. Give the story to Mary Heyer, and then later on he changed his mind. So he is on the phone with Keel and Heyer, and the guy says to Keel, he says, "Yeah, that scientist fella said we should forget all about it." And Keel said, "Scientist fella?" She says, "Yeah, he seemed like he knew what he was talking about." And so Keel said, well, how did this guy know? Because you didn't tell anybody else, right? He says, damned if I know. So somebody came and wanted him to be quiet. So Keel forgot about it. The guy's anonymous. It's not worth reporting. A few days later, Woodrow Derenberger tells the same story. And then several months later, there was a woman across the river in Gallipolis, Ohio. He calls her Mrs. Bryant in the Mothman Prophecies. She was leaving. She was a nurse, I believe. She was leaving the hospital or the doctor's office, whatever it was. She remained anonymous. And she saw this craft come down in the parking lot. It's late at night. These two men come out that sound very much like Indrid Cold and this other guy. And another pointless, mindless conversation. And she doesn't, she's kind of paralyzed. She can't do anything about it. And they leave. They take off. The next day, she sees them in town, walking downtown in plain clothes. And one of them nods at her like, oh, nice to see you again. This stuff really gets out. You go to the fringe and then you go a little further. But she had all kinds of other things. She had her own little Skinwalker Ranch going on her farm. There were animal mutilations, cattle mutilations right there on the farm. There were, her son was seeing these large boxcar-like craft of some kind silently move over the farm. She was having classic haunting phenomena, apparitions walking through her house and then walking out the door, which had no porch, and went out back. It was just one of these, and she was, she had gone to the police. They thought she was nuts. When she was talking to John Keel, that's when she asked him, she said, did that man see him again? Meaning, did Woodrow Derenberger see Indrid Cold again? And Keel said, yes, he says he did. And that's when she told him her story about seeing these Indrid Cold-like people. So you have, this happens so much in the paranormal. There are some elements that seem like there's some reality, some physicality to them, and there's other stuff that's just nonsense. And it's so hard to piece it all together and try to make sense of it. But yeah, the Indrid Cold thing, of course, they dramatized that to a degree in the Mothman Prophecies film.
Well, it also came into play, as we're about to go to break here at the bottom of the hour, with Alan Greenfield and
Yes.
the Secret Cipher of the UFO Knots. It made an appearance in the Hellier documentary series as well. Indrid Cold, Mothman. Steve Ward is here breaking it all down. We're going to go with a little bit more Mothman, then switch over to Dogman. How come there's no dog women out there? We'll find out what's from Steve when we come back on Spaced Out Radio right after this.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron Bumblefoot.
All right, we're clear. Flying on by tonight, man.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. Love shows like this.
And there are so many of these areas that you can find in the literature. There's a fascinating book that was written by F.W. Holliday, who was the Loch Ness researcher that went through the interesting evolution where he thought Nessie was a plesiosaur, then it was some kind of an oversized mollusk, and then thought it was some kind of a paranormal entity. But he and Randolph Pugh wrote a book called The Dyfed Enigma. Dyfed was a county in southwestern Wales, 1977. And boy, you talk about the three-ring circus of the paranormal that was going on there. Just bizarre. 7-foot silver humanoids, little guys with curved noses and slanted eyebrows coming out of the same egg-shaped craft as the tall guys in boiler suits or whatever they were. effects on the animals, orbs. People would, there were a lot of connections with folklore. People that were in proximity of these silver giants would develop a rash sometimes, some kind of a weird dermatological rash. Well, there was something they used to call elf burn that you would get if you were in close proximity with the little people. It's just, and then there was the displaced cattle. On
December the 3rd, I tested positive for COVID. I was to the point where I really couldn't even walk.
She was admitted to the Tupelo Hospital. That's where she remained for 82 days.
That was the first time they told Reggie he could come see me.
I nearly lost my wife. I mean, that's real. There ain't no false information. And I don't want to see you lose a loved one.
Sponsored by Delta Health Alliance. Go to getyourshotms.org.
With MailChimp, you get a whole lot more than a URL. You get an all-in-one marketing platform to help drive sales. That means you can connect your data to make more informed, smarter decisions. And you get powerful automation tools like our Customer Journey Builder to ensure you never miss an opportunity to turn shoppers into loyal customers. So if you're ready to integrate your marketing and boost sales, get started today at MailChimp.com/smartmarketing. MailChimp, built for growing businesses.
The Broadmoor farm, the Ripperston farm. And they'd be all penned up. And then they'd show up a half mile later at the Broadmoor farm, and nobody knew how they got there. One day, Billy Coombs he put 16 of the cows in a pen, and turns around to go in the barn, turns on the milking machines, comes back, and the cows are all gone. Where are they? They're at the Ripperston farm, the Broadmoor farm. I'm mixing them up. And there was that incident on the Skinwalker Ranch, where the bulls turned up in that little trailer. There was another, Alan Godfrey. I interviewed him. He's a classic abductee. He was a police officer in Todmorden, England. And he was called on this, where these cows showed up in this gated community. And they couldn't figure out how the hell they got there.
No kidding.
And this one lady, this older lady that had called out on him. Godfrey at first thought it was a hoax. And she told him, she said, "I may be old, but I'm not crazy, and I know what I saw." And she had seen some kind of a strange light. It was after that Godfrey had his abduction experience. And when he was recounting it under hypnosis, and at one point he says, there's a bloody dog in here, inside this craft, a large black dog inside this spacecraft. And, shades of what? The black shuck, the black spectral dog that haunts the ruins and castles in England. I mean, this stuff is, if it wasn't so fascinating, it would send you to the funny farm, I think.
That is amazing. Amazing.
He's a super credible guy.
I could just sit here and listen to stories all day long, man, and just shut up. Just make it happen. All right, we have about 1 minute.
Well, this is a lot of fun, Dave. I appreciate this.
No, this is so much fun, dude. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. We'll bring you back on again very soon.
I'd love it.
There's your, let's see here. Quickly, insider question here. Why am I not allowed? TMI. There's your answer. Yeah. Oh, I love it. John, I love it. Thank you, buddy. John Davies. Oh, you are incredible. You are incredible. Good morning to you, my friend.
Got a good audience here.
This guy here, Jonathan Davies, Steve.
Yes.
Very connected. Very connected. His connections are incredible. Thank you to Surf Jer and Smithy for the super chats tonight. Very much appreciate the love and support through the super chat. Really, thank you so much. Thank you to all our new subscribers and everybody tuning in. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, thumbs down. We're going to rock right now, guys. Second half. We pass the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading Shirky Poo's Newswire, and checking out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight. Steve Ward is here. We're talking Mothman, Indrid Cold, and a little bit later on we're going to get into Dogman. We got him for another hour here on the mighty SOR. Let's do this, Steve. Indrid Cold, aliens getting involved with Mothman. I mean, this Indrid Cold, I mean, we have seen him pop up everywhere for a while, and then he just disappeared. What do you think happened to him?
Oh, boy. There was also in an old issue of Fate magazine, there was somebody that claimed that about a year later he showed up. You have to be careful of some of the, you might want to call them Johnny-come-lately reports. We don't know if that's true or not. I know that Susan Shepard was a regular at the Mothman Festival. She spoke often on Indrid Cold. Great lady. Another great person that we lost not too long ago. And she was from Parkersburg. She ran some kind of a tour group up there.
Former guest on this show as well.
Yes, great lady. It seems to me that one of her relatives claimed to have had an encounter with Indrid Cold, and that would be in one of her books. She also told me that, now here, some of Derenberger's stuff, Keel believed this too, that Derenberger made up a bunch of stuff. But it seems like there was some substance to the original contact. It's just so hard to say. But Susan Shepard told me that sometimes his family would be going out, and he would say, you're going to see something. You're going to see a UFO, or however he put it, when you're out today. And sure enough, they would see something unexplained in the sky. So, another thing to put in the story that gives it some credibility, I guess. But he hasn't. Well, when you get into the Men in Black phenomena, he actually kind of fits the profile of some of them. There's the Men in Black, by the way. Keel used it as a kind of a generic term because all these characters, whatever the hell they were, didn't always dress up in dark suits and fedoras. Sometimes they would come as Air Force officers who weren't Air Force officers. They checked on it later on, and there was nobody by the name of Major French or whatever it was. Some really bizarre reports would come out of that, although some of the Men in Black phenomena just seem to be, government goons showing up, harassing UFO witnesses, trying to collect their photographs. So another wide, complex subject where there's just not one. That's one thing I can say, that definitively in all of this stuff, there's not one answer to all these things, unfortunately. So that's why we're chasing our tails so much all the time.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, Indrid Cold seems to pop in and out at the most mysterious of times, starting with the Mothman. And then, like I said, Alan Greenfield with the secret cipher of the UFO Knots. And I have a weird story about that and his publisher, Olaf Phillips, that happened between Olaf and I earlier this year, in January. And it was freaky. It was very freaky. It led to a very weird logo here that came to me on a phone call. And it was extremely odd, and we had numerous conversations with Alan about this incident, and yet Indrid Cold not there. Of course, I know nothing about the guy, or if he's even real. Do you believe that he is a real entity, an alien?
I'm a little. I don't. I'm going to say no. I don't think he was an alien. Let's say that let's say he did have some reality. Let's say there was some real experience going on there. If you look at the history of the contact movement from aliens, entities of all descriptions, or even people that get messages from wherever, oftentimes these guys are liars. You know, people have these conversations and they think they're the first one to get this revelation, whether it comes out of the clouds or a man from a spaceship. You know, we've had, and this goes with the channeling too. Some of the channelers, Ruth Montgomery, her guides told her that we were going to have these pole shifts in the 1990s. Didn't happen. So many of these predictions don't happen. So I'm always skeptical of any messages, even if these are real experiences, even if they're a real physical entity stepping out of some kind of a craft. I'm always doubting. I tell people, don't believe it. It's probably, you know, John Keel had these great catchphrases, and one of them was the great phonograph in the sky. And what that meant was people would get these revelations, however they got them, and they think, oh, this is wonderful. I'm the first person to get this. And if you go back in history, nope, it's been repeated over and over again. You know, isolated people would get these things. You can find them in obscure volumes of forgotten lore, right? And so I just caution people that the messages, the revelations, while some of them may be legitimate, they may be lofty predictions or great knowledge, I just caution people to be very careful about believing them.
What do you believe in?
I believe that there is a very complex phenomena going on, that a large aspect of that is connected with human consciousness, that there may be a co-creation to some degree. This is not the whole story, but when you look at John Keel, his ideas of ultra-terrestrials, transmogrifications of energy, the reflective factor, the way these things sort of reflect back our belief systems, Carl Jung with his collective unconscious, the idea of tulpas. Remember Alexandria David Neal, who wrote Magic and Mystery in Tibet, is supposed to have created a tulpa when she was living with the Tibetans. They supposedly taught her how to create one of these things, and it didn't go very well. She created this jolly little llama, not the animal, but the sage, the seer, and she could only see this guy, and he was this fat, chubby little happy entity, and over time he became mischievous. His appearance changed, and then a little bit further along the line, he got very thin and lean and very nasty. And she claims in her book that she had to actually destroy this thing with her mind. Well, again, we don't know if that's true or not, but a lot of these things may simply be thought forms. But that's not the only, you know, I was on that track for a long time, very much influenced by Keel, and I still think Keel was 100 years ahead of everybody. But there also does seem to be Albert Rosales uses the term in his books, the others amongst us. There does seem to be, in some cases, some other intelligence, some other entities. They may be part of this planet. They may be ET. They may be coming from other realms, dimensions that we can't access. So there seems to be, and a lot of people don't like this, but both things seem to be going on. There seems to be some kind of an intelligence. There may be, if there's one crashed saucer, that puts it in the realm of the physical. I'm kind of skeptical of Roswell and many of the other claims, but there still may very well be a real physicality to some of this. So then how do we reconcile both of them? I think that there is some element of human consciousness that creates these phantasms, these images, or helps shape them. I think that if there were no ETs, we would create them somehow, as part of our our human consciousness and just the way we're wired. Creating other gods, other beings or whatever. But what if there's also some other intelligence? I mean, a real physical intelligence that's interacting with us somehow. What if they're aware of this mechanism in human consciousness? And if that's so, and this is way out on a limb, but could they perhaps utilize that and exploit it? Perhaps they could, using technology or focus of will, create their own images to mislead us, to misguide us, to make us see whatever they want. Perhaps both major things are going on. The bottom line is, Dave, I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, well, let me ask you this then. Do you believe that Dogman exists? Are you someone
yes.
who... Okay, so why do you believe Dogman exists?
Because, Keel again, I can barely choke out a few sentences without talking about John Keel. But he talked about these kinds of cryptids, that they seem to, it's almost like they come out of nowhere, but they act like real animals. I mean, they eat roadkill, they will kill other animals and leave footprints and hair samples, and then they seem to sort of dissipate. Recently, after I spoke at the the Beast of Bray Road conference this past October. And that Saturday night, we went over to Lee Hampel's farm. Now, let me just backtrack a little bit. Linda Godfrey, with the Beast of Bray Road, she's the one that kind of introduced us to the Dogman phenomena. It's been going on forever, but it seems to me that people that were seeing these things were pretty quiet about it. It's almost like it was maybe sort of legitimate or not so crazy to see a Bigfoot, but man, an upright canid about 6 foot tall with red with yellow eyes and in a mean countenance. Let's stay away from that. But we went to now Lee Hampel. Well, I'm jumping all over. Linda Godfrey wrote The Beast of Bray Road. She was working for The Week, a little newspaper in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. She was a cartoonist and wrote this column. And she ran into these stories about people seeing these dog-like things on Bray Road. Sometimes they see it on all fours, and they think it's some big mangy dog, and then it would stand upright. And one person saw one of these things on its knees eating roadkill. So she went to the local police, and the sheriff there actually had a file that said werewolf, because he'd been getting these reports for some time. Very interesting that right in the first part of the book, The Beast of Bray Road, she talks about how people that were having these experiences would have other paranormal experiences, just like the Mothman, just like so many other people that are connected in this miasma of strangeness. And so she's written several books on this, and it's just grown. Well, in a subsequent book called The Monsters Among Us, she talked about Lee Hampel, but using a different name. And she was talking about these strange mists he was seeing on his farm. And so we went there that night, and he showed us 2 hours of photographs that he had taken on these game cameras. When he first went there, he bought the farm in about 2007, started farming it in 2011, and a few years after, some of the locals had told him, he said, there's a werewolf on your land. And he thought, this guy was a mathematician for 45 years in Illinois, a man of science. What do you mean there's a werewolf on my property? But he would talk to other people, credible people in the area that had seen this thing, and then he saw it. He's even had missing time on his property. So we sat, we heard his stories. These strange mists would show up, and sometimes they would be captured by the camera, but you couldn't see them with your naked eye. There's a photograph of him triggering the camera, apparently, out in broad daylight, and he's surrounded by this mist, but he didn't see anything. There would be deer carcasses out on his property, and you can tell by the timestamp on the photographs how long this takes. There would be a mist that would show up, and sometime later, the carcass would be gone. No drag marks, no footprints. But speaking of footprints, he started seeing these dog-like footprints. 5 toes, that doesn't make any sense, a pad and a heel. In the snow, sometimes they would start in the middle of nowhere, and sometimes he'd see them stop in the middle of nowhere. He told his brother Fred at first about this, and Fred suggested that they must have parachuted in, tongue-in-cheek, obviously. Now, Fred is convinced, as Lee is, that there's something bizarre going on the property. It's so hard to convey the photographs, what I saw there, but there are objects in the sky. There's one that looks like a metallic turtle shell, and the thing zips in. These are all stills, but you can tell by the timestamp that this thing just whipped around a tree in no time. There was one bizarre, you can't make sense of some of these things. There's one photograph in the daylight where it's sort of like a rope or a ribbon or something suspended in the air. It's black. It makes two hills, 2 humps. And then Lee moves the camera over, the image over. So you see something that's like a machine, like a boxy machine with a couple of circles on it or wheels or something that's suspended in the air. Strange light phenomena where the beams are coming down at night and then they stop in the middle of nowhere. You can't freeze frame light going at 186,000 miles a second. He was doing experiments with roadkill. He had this raccoon out there, and then one time it was in the tall grass, and there was nothing there that would disturb the grass. So whatever affected it had to actually lean over like a man. But he saw it had a perfect incision down its body, and the entrails were hanging out. Pretty gross. And then later on it disappeared. He would leave other game out, and something would take it. Sometimes there was a miss, sometimes not. But the cameras wouldn't function, or whatever it was cloaked. There's a couple pictures where you can see kind of an outline of something that could have been the dog man. Now, he's seen this thing twice, and he's documented the footprints. Let me digress for just a moment. In Monsters Among Us, Linda Godfrey talks about a sighting in the 90s, or Highway 81, Pennsylvania. This guy is driving along at night, and the road goes into where it would have been a hill, and on the one side is a forest, and he sees this light moving along the forest, and he thinks it's some, careless guy on maybe an ATV.
At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more. At Capella University, you're in control of your education. With the game-changing FlexPath format, you can set your own deadlines and move at your own pace. The faster you move, the more you save. Visit capella.edu to learn more.
He sees it's going to intersect with the road, and he's concerned this guy's going so fast, he's going to go off this little ledge and then come down to the road. Well, as he gets closer and sees the light come down, it morphs into an upright canid and takes off. There's many cases in the literature where people see some kind of a light or orb, and it seems to transmute into some kind of a creature. So is it really actually transforming, or is that the window that it comes through for wherever else it comes from? He got hair samples of this thing, and forgive me, I can't remember what the core inside the hair sample is, but I forget what it's called. But it's not there. It's like it's like it's not a complete animal or something like that. And I wonder if Keel was right when he talked about how these things seem to come into existence sometimes, act like real animals. But here's the paradox. These things are real. They leave footprints. People see them. They eat roadkill. They affect their environment. But it's so hard to capture them on camera. That suggests there's some intelligence involved. But they don't seem to be the intelligence. They just seem to act like blind animals, just not blind animals, but you know what I mean, animals governed by instinct. So here's again, we're filled with paradoxes. It's real, it affects the environment, but there's so much of it that doesn't make any sense. The analogy I give usually is that it's like if we had a 1,000-piece puzzle and we could look at it, we might be able to say, oh, okay, now that makes sense. But we've only got about 12 pieces of it, and they're scattered all over the place. So we have no idea how to put them together. We just don't have any idea at this point what the big picture is. But we have made progress from the 60s where UFOs were just ETs, Bigfoot lived in the Northwest as some kind of a big monkey, and ghosts were ghosts, and the paranormal had nothing to do with any of that. Apparently, Charles Fort was right. Apparently, John Keel was right.
This Dogman, we first hear about it publicly at the Beast of Bray Road. Then we start hearing about it popping up in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. And now, 2021, near the end, we see it everywhere from British Columbia, where I am, down to sightings on the East Coast in New York and South, and right across the nations and the continent. Do you think this creature is spreading out, or people are recognizing maybe what they thought was a bear or a wolf or a Bigfoot, that they're starting to recognize that this is a different creature?
Yeah, I think there's got to be an element. People would see this thing in the woods and, very hard to process. But, there's a Dogman Encounters Radio, Vic Cundiff. He has people on that a lot of people saw this thing years ago, but they just kept quiet about it for, obvious reasons. So perhaps that's another element. Perhaps many people have seen this actually all over the world. That may be what our werewolf legends come from, but perhaps it has been one of those things that's just too crazy, and people haven't. Now there are places they can talk about it. They know other people have seen them, but if this is a phenomena that is perhaps tied somewhat to human consciousness and their belief systems, perhaps more of them are manifesting or whatever. It's impossible to say, because we can't step back and be objective enough. We can't be all knowing to know exactly what's been going on. But it is interesting that now this is a phenomena. They're just as prevalent as Bigfoots, really. But here's something, Dave. Why is it? I mean, we talk about the Skinwalker Ranch. Not too much in the way of Bigfoots out that way, although I guess there have been. But a phantom menagerie of all kinds of creatures. We had the Bradshaw Ranch in near Sedona. That was another Skinwalker Ranch, Bigfoot, UFOs, time loss, etc. Why is it, I wonder, that the Dogman creature seems to be prevalent along with all this other stuff? Missing time, strange craft, strange mechanical devices, and Bigfoot. Bigfoot is prevalent in southern Wisconsin, I guess, but
right.
It seems like the different areas have at least some specific characteristic. The Mothman isn't something that pops up in a lot of these high strangeness areas.
All right, Steve, I'm going to get you to hold on. We got you for another half an hour here on Spaced Out Radio to kick off hour number 3. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, it's Dave 101 time. UFO topic tonight on Spaced Out Radio.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig.
There we go. We're clear. I swallowed my water the wrong way. You know when you get that cough, that dry cough afterwards? So when we get to the break at the bottom of the hour, just stick through until we get to the break, and then I will bring you on properly there, or say goodnight to you properly. Okay.
Okay. All right.
All right. Cool. Let's go here. Thank you so much again for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
That was awesome, man. Let's get over to here. Sometimes I think my job is done during the night, and then I realize that I got to get everything set up for the after show as well. Let's go like this. Copy. All right. We're almost there. Felipe, how you doing, man? I'm glad you were here to do this for us. So what do you do when you're not chasing monsters, Steve?
Well, I'm allegedly a retired man of leisure. We're going to be moving in the not too distant future, so I'm gathering up a lot of books and stuff that I don't expect to be using right away, and there's a lot to get together in the house. But I do a show, a podcast called The High Strangeness Factor, and so I do some great networking with some good friends in the field, and we Skype a lot, occasionally get together, and it's nice that lately people have been able to get together again.
Yes.
To go to some of these conferences. So, although they canceled the Mothman conference again this last year, so that's 2 years, and that's 2 years too many.
Yeah. Jonathan wants to know, do you know about Ripperstone Farm?
Yes. That was in Dublin, Wales. That's at least I know about it during the, pretty much around 1977. And there were several books. There was the Dublin Enigma. There's at least 3 other books, maybe 4, that cover some of the bizarre happenings there. But, yeah, that was fascinating stuff. And it's also covered in, I don't know if you're familiar with Haunted Skies, that series put together about Britain, not always Britain, but there's phenomenal books. Can't remember the name of the guy that puts them together, but he that covers some aspects of that in a lot of detail. And in fact, Randall Pugh began to believe that this was actually demonic and not really ET or anything like that. He and Holliday made a lot of connections between what was going on in folklore, but while Pugh doesn't mention it in the Dublin Enigma, he did begin to believe that they were dealing with dark forces.
Wow. We've got just over 1 minute to go here.
Okay.
Good morning, Joey Hayes from the UK. Geez, a lot of people in the UK getting up early this morning for our chat room. 203 watching right now.
Oh, good deal. My co-host and my producer for my show, Andy Mercer, is a Brit, and so we have to deal with the 5 hours difference sometimes.
Yeah.
When we have somebody, we had somebody on from the in Pacific time one time. So
when do you broadcast?
It's every other Tuesday. The podcast comes out. So of course I make the show whenever I can. And,
All right.
Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Right on. Okay, we got 17 seconds. Thank you to Ben, Surf Jer, and Smithy for the super chats tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who's hit that subscribe button and rang that bell. And, of course, here we go. Get your horns up. Hour 3, beginning now, Mr. B.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. What do you got for us, Clam? Tentacles. Tentacles is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read up on Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. For the final time tonight, Steve Ward is here. He's chasing down Mothman, chasing down Dogman, UFOs. He's tripping on legends based out of the beautiful state of Michigan. And we got him until the bottom of the hour talking Dogman. You know, Steve, one thing about this creature, people always say that it seems to get telepathic with them, that if they raise some sort of weaponry to this animal, creature, monster, whatever we want to call it, that they seem to get this telepathic message that is like, yeah, that's not a good idea. I'd lower your rifle. Have you ran into any cases like that?
What I've heard is that people feel a strong sense of evil coming from them, something really sinister, whereas I guess we could say that's a distinction between some Bigfoot encounters. While people get pretty freaked out by the big hairy bipeds that they might encounter in the woods, the Dogman seems to have a malevolence to him. So now let me. I just found out today that Lee Hampel again with his farm right near Bray Road. He told us that there was somebody out there. I didn't just tell this story, did I? Somebody was, a group was out there with permission. They were going to spend the night and see what they could see. And at 10:30, they came and knocked on his door. And they said, we got to leave. We were told to leave. And he said, what do you mean? I own the property. You can stay all night. And he said, no, we were told to leave. And apparently they had some kind of a ghost box or something like that. And that's the message they got. So they got the hell out of there. Somebody else wrote me recently that heard the shows I've been doing on the Bray Road, that they were out there till about 3 a.m. one night. But the fog got so thick and so forth that the way he put it was it pushed them out. So these mists or whatever don't seem to be normal atmospheric conditions. And with the shadow I'm sure you're familiar with David Paulides
Yes.
and his missing 411 books. You know, I don't know. I just think that if I saw a mist a kick up like that, I might get the hell out of there too. Who was it? Elias Owen, who wrote the book Welsh Folklore. He talks about the little people, the fairies, and how wayfarers on the road were very concerned about traveling at night and encountering these mists, because he said the little people would take them up into the air and deposit them someplace, you know, for a little bit of mischief, and let them find their way home. Now that just sounds like an abduction, you know, situation where people are walking along the road, they encounter some kind of force, and they lose the time, and they're deposited somewhere else. So I don't know. I don't know that I would stick around if things got a little bit too misty either. We really don't know what we're dealing with. You know, there was that great in the book on hunters by David Paulides. He has that encounter toward the end. Jan Maccabee.
Yes.
She was a bow hunter. She's in her blind, and she sees something jumping around in the tree, and it's got that sort of some people call it the shimmer or the predator effect or the quicksilver curtain is what one of the researchers calls it, Thomas Powell. And she took photographs with her phone. Her husband, Bruce Maccabee, who's a photography expert and worked for the Navy in such a capacity, when he developed the photograph, if you look at it, it's reproduced. There's these black hairs that seem to be coming out of the side of the shimmer. At the same time, she didn't know it at the time, but she got a text that she read later. Her nephew, which was about a half mile away, he was at band practice or something, I think, at the local high school. They saw some kind of a light or craft hovering over the football field. At the same time, all this stuff was going on with Jan. So, and I know that she has mentioned that they've had other stuff that they've captured in trap cameras on her property. So, you know, I don't know. A lot of people have tried to spend the night on Lee Hampel's farm, and they don't get very far. I know that if there's a YouTube video, Bucks County Paranormal Investigates. Now, I met these guys, Dominic and Eric and Ellen. They did an investigation, and the YouTube video runs about a half hour. They didn't stay out there too long. You can hear them. They got these howls back and forth on the property. I don't know if it's the dog man or not, but they said they saw eye shine about 6 feet off the ground. Now, unless these guys are on stilts or something like that, or you've got some kind of a crazy expensive. They were Dominic, by the way. Dominic Settel is a sensitive, and when he goes, he doesn't normally do the cryptid thing, but he does pick up vibes in different places. And I asked him, I said, Dominic, what did you feel like when you were out there that night? And he said, I felt like I was in a diving suit in a shark cage, and I was holding the bait. Oh. They went the next week. They went to the Pine Barrens to look for Bigfoot, because there are Bigfoot reports out there. They're with a couple of seasoned researchers. They got some crazy howls, real or not, I don't know. But Dominic remarked how more frightening and more unnerving it was to be on Lee Hampel's farm, in proximity of the Dogman, perhaps, than being out there in the deep, dark Pine Barrens looking for Bigfoot.
Jonathan in the UK is asking, do you think Dogman bilocates through time? Have you heard that? And are long lifers with instant healing?
I haven't heard about the healing, although there are a lot of healings associated with UFO phenomena. What's his name? Preston. I can't think of his full name right now.
Preston Dennett?
Preston Bennett.
Dennett?
Preston Dennett? Preston Dennett. He wrote a book on 300 healings of people that had close proximity with UFOs. There's the sort of the good and the evil, the positive and the negative poles in a lot of UFO phenomena. So I've heard about it there. I've not heard about that associated with Dogman, but I have heard about.
With MailChimp, you get a whole lot more than a URL. You get an all-in-one marketing platform to help drive sales. That means you can connect your data to make more informed, smarter decisions, and you get powerful automation tools like our Customer Journey Builder to ensure you never miss an opportunity to turn shoppers into loyal customers. So if you're ready to integrate your marketing and boost sales, get started today at MailChimp.com/smartmarketing. MailChimp, built for growing businesses.
From HBO's Insecure and executive producer Issa Rae comes a new satirical true crime podcast, We Stay Looking. After investigating the disappearance of a missing Black woman in Looking for LaToya, Terry J. Vaughn is back as citizen sleuth Rose Cranberry. Through comedy, We Stay Looking sheds light on the serious issues of systemic racism within the media and the criminal justice system. Produced by Radio and Tenderfoot TV with HBO, We Stay Looking is available December 8th on all podcast platforms. You can binge the entire season early, December 1st on HBO Max.
It associated with Bigfoot, strangely enough. I don't know about going through time. If some of these other reports of seeing the orb morphing into a dogman, they are either coming into existence or coming from somewhere else and have existed, through that whole sequence. But I'm very hesitant to get very, no pun intended, dogmatic on these things because we just don't know. We try and gather all the information we can, listen to the witnesses, and then look at the patterns that exist, and hopefully we can get some real information out of all of it.
Have you ever heard of Dogman and Sasquatch brawling for territory? Because I'm going to tell you right now, that is a pay-per-view event I want to see.
It is. Well, I haven't, but it certainly, it would kind of make sense. I mean, if both these things are real and people are experiencing them, as far as I know, people in that particular area haven't had any Bigfoot reports, but that doesn't mean they haven't. Dogman seems to be prevalent there. And there are some places where you don't seem to hear about the Dogman, but, there's so much we really don't know. At least that I don't know.
Okay, so, no, and I understand that, but have you ever heard of territorial markings or I know nobody's seen them fight, but I would assume two giant alpha-type creatures like that would be very, very protective of their area and wouldn't like other predators coming in.
I think that's a logical assumption, but we just don't know. We just don't know what their normal stomping grounds are, or where they might overlap. Which is so much we don't know. They seem, my impression was that when the Bucks County team went out there, and when other people have gone out there, it's almost like the dogmen are sentinels. You get too close, and they start howling back and forth at each other, or they may even show themselves. It's almost like maybe, I don't know, maybe perhaps they're used by whatever intelligence is there as guardians. There are beliefs that the dogmen were guardians of some of the mounds, the effigy mounds. And in fact, Linda Godfrey, in her second book, Hunting the American Werewolf, quite by accident, she took a book. I think I've got it here. It's on Indian mounds of Wisconsin, and it shows a map of southern Wisconsin and the various effigy mounds. And she noticed that clusters of dogman reports were almost perfectly coinciding with certain types of mounds, namely the water spirit mounds and the panther mounds. Now, the panther mounds are, if you look at them, they're very simple. They're like if you would draw the outline of a panther and with the small tail and the ears and so forth and the legs. The water spirit mounds seem to be, to me, physically smaller, but the thing that distinguishes them is sort of a long pointed tail. But for some reason, perhaps total coincidence, these sightings, these clusters of sightings, seem to overlap in those areas. So that brings up another question. John Keel talked about the ancient mounds and the strange lights in the sky, and he asked the question, what came first? Were the lights there manifesting, and did the ancients build the mounds to acknowledge them, or did they build the mounds and did the residue of their consciousness or their worship create the lights?
Creating light, that almost sounds spiritual. So could you draw the line then to maybe this being a hellhound or something along those lines?
Well, there may have been attacks from by these things on humans, but it seems more like these creatures, including Bigfoot, are just there to scare the hell out of you. Now, perhaps some people have encountered them and been dinner, and there was nobody there to witness it. And if they did find a body, they might just think it's some other natural predator. So I don't know, but it does seem like, as scary as they are, they don't seem to be attacking people. They certainly could. I mean, if these reports are real, if these people in this area are seeing something physical, and it does seem like they are, it would seem like, I mean, look, if there were actually wolves there in that area in the same number, I think perhaps people would be attacked sometimes. But people don't seem to be, with my limited knowledge about it, they don't seem to be attacked by these things.
Then why the fear? Why do we always feel like these things are ready to kill us and rip us apart? Butch Witkowski says the same thing about these bipedal canines that are in the Pennsylvania area, central Pennsylvania.
Well, it does seem to be when Eric, Dominic, and Ellen, when they were out there, they were pretty freaked out, and Dominic was picking up negative vibes. Eric he said he doesn't normally get unnerved at these places. I mean, he's been in some creepy places, but it really got to him, and Ellen felt the same way. So, we don't know. Is it one's imagination running away with them, or is there something? Well, we talk about some of the researchers talk about infrasound in Bigfoot, and they can kind of somehow influence people through some kind of a mental blast or contact. I don't know, but these things could just be scary enough by themselves. But there may be something there that is. There's something maybe perhaps a little more there where they exude something like that. So, I'm kind of hoping that I will get a chance to spend the night, or at least part of the night, on Lee Hampel's farm. I've always wanted to get access to one of these places, which we call high strangeness areas, window areas, portals, vortexes, whatever term you want. It's almost like on that farm is a laboratory where people can go and actually experience the phenomena, or at least observe it, after it's been photographed.
We have about 5.5 minutes left with you tonight. When it comes to all these cryptids and everything, we've talked Dogman and Mothman mainly tonight, but do you have a favorite encounter that you have experienced that you just cannot put your finger on them? What happened?
I've only had one weird experience, and that was one night. I was with some friends, and I was in Point Pleasant. They went home, and I thought, well, I want to go into the TNT area alone at night And, you know, it's no big deal to the locals. They can camp out there, and at least they used to be able to as a campground on fish and so forth. But I thought, you know, with the creepy legends and all the history of this area, I just wanted to see if I could do it. So I went down Potters Creek Road. Potters Creek has the line of igloo roads. And I went to this 7th one, which we normally go to. And some of those igloos have been featured on different shows where they go in there with their recorders and so forth. And I went down there. It was it was late in May, and there was all kinds of nightlife out there. I mean, the bugs and the frogs was almost deafening. So I went down there, and I had my flashlight and my recorder, and I went down to one of the igloos, and that was about it. So I'm driving back, and I should have written down and paid better attention to what was happening. Although I've heard other people say when weird stuff happens sometimes, they don't react properly. So I'm driving back down Route 62, and I experienced a couple flashes of light, like a strobe, like a flash and a flash. And I can't figure out where it came from. And it was in a real dark area. So I went back to my motel, which was across the river in Gallipolis. And I opened the door, and I look at the clock, and I think, well, you know, in thinking back, I might have lost some time. I don't know. But that's not the weird part. I opened the door. The TV set turned on by itself and started flipping through channels continuously. And I thought, holy expletive, this doesn't happen to me. This happens to other people. So I did what any rugged paranormal investigator would do. I unplugged the TV set and went to bed. So now there's postscript to this. A year later, I'm in the same motel, next room over, and those two buddies that I was there with that night that went home early, we're all crammed in there saving some money, right? And we're talking, and all of a sudden the TV set turns on by itself. Now, in both cases, it's one of these older TV sets, not one of the big, fancy, digital ones or whatever. And that was it. Next day, one of the guys and I went back into the room to collect something. TV set turned on by itself and then flipped through a couple channels. So we took the remote and we went through walls and tried to see if maybe it was a stray signal. I don't know. A few years later, it was a Mothman festival. The next room over, which is in a corner and a bit bigger, there were two couples, friends of ours that were staying there. They had one of the big fancy screen TVs in there. So they're having trouble with the sound. The sound keeps getting lower and lower, and they start to crank it up more and more. Then all of a sudden it starts blasting. Then they start to have to turn it down again and go through the whole thing. And then all of a sudden there's a can of something that was sitting on one of the tables, and it flies off by itself. So my theory is perhaps, the TNT area was in fact an Indian burial ground. Years ago, there were all kinds of battles out there. Perhaps I brought back something from the TNT area. If I did, fortunately, it's still there flipping channels, and it didn't come home with me. But that night, when that TV set went on by itself and flipped through channels, I just wasn't prepared. And I haven't really had anything since.
My friend, we got 1 minute to go here with you tonight, Steve Cook. Steve Ward, thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio. What a pleasure to have you here with us. Do us a favor, let everybody know where they can find your research.
I'm on Facebook. If you type in Steve Ward and Battle Creek, you can probably find me. I do a podcast on Paranormal UK Radio called The High Strangeness Factor. You can also hear me as a correspondent on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files on several different platforms. And that's on every week. My show's on every other week. And I've seen some really nice comments from the audience tonight, which I really appreciate.
You won them over. You won them over big time. And thank you so much for coming on Spaced Out Radio, Steve. You're a plethora of information. And I don't throw the word plethora around for just anybody, my friend. That's an important word here. I
appreciate it, Dave, so much. It's been a really, really great show. Thank you.
We are definitely going to do it again. Steve Ward, everybody. And coming up next on Spaced Out Radio, oh yeah, it's Dave 101. It returns this week after the audio issues last week. And we're going to get into UFOs. Is the military-industrial complex trying to slap around elected officials? You'll hear it from me when we get back on Spaced Out Radio right after this. So stay tuned. Mighty SOR continues.
Hello, this is your guitar man, Ron.
Great show, buddy.
Thanks, Dave, very much.
That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
I'll look forward to the next time.
Me too, my friend. Me too. It'll be probably spring.
Okay.
Spring, yeah. That'll be cool. Let's do
Be
it.
another Dogman conference by then, and perhaps I'll be able to brave Lee Hample's farm and have a report.
That would be awesome. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Okay, everybody, I'm just going to run and grab some water here quickly, so just bear with me, and be right back. All right, sorry about that. That was a good show. Oh, don't everybody leave now? We've lost like 10 people. Guest is gone. We're out of here. No. Just had to pee. Grab it, fill up my water. Prepare for day 101, peoples. I gotta figure out how to turn that down. Felipe, if you want to stay in touch with a lot of the members, go to our Facebook group, Spaced Out Radio. There's a lot of people talking in there. Hey, there's the lovely and talented Nicole Sakic. She's not just a cook, people. Not just a cook. That is true. Three-year anniversary that Nicole made her debut on Spaced Out Radio. We've been stuck with her like a fungus ever since. Testing, 1, 2, good. Hi, gorgeous Jenster. Hey, Jen, on Instagram, can you send me your phone number privately to my Instagram account? I wanted to talk to you about your design stuff. Just to get some ideas. That would be cool. Thank you to Ben from UFO Garage, Surf Jer, and Smithy. Make sure you guys are all following the following shows that we follow here as well, whether it's UFO Garage, Paranormal Chop Shop, the Chad Smith Show, the Nicole Sackage channel, and, of course, Thomas Fessler as well. That would be absolutely wonderful if you could, and they're great shows. We support them. We love them. So here we go, everyone. We rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears. Want to remind you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read up on Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's time once again for Dave 101.
It's time for Dave 101.
Ladies and gentlemen of ufology, if whether you're studying it, researching it, and experiencing it, or just have a curious interest, it is time for you and the rest of us to start looking at the mainstream media and holding them accountable for what they are not showing these days. Over the last 2 weeks, we have seen the military take on the elected in the United States.
At Capella University, education is as smart as the world around us. With the FlexPath format, you can take classes at your own pace, set your own deadlines, and even leverage your previous experience to move faster. Now that's smart. Learn more at capella.edu. At Capella University, education is as smart as the world around us. With the FlexPath format, you can take classes at your own pace, set your own deadlines, and even leverage your previous experience to move faster. Now that's smart. Learn more at capella.edu.
States. Now, we know the United States military spends a couple $1 trillion a year on whatever it is they want to buy, whatever new toys they want to test out, or future technologies, all for the sake of defense. Now, this is including UFOs. Just about, 10 days ago, out of the Pentagon came this report that basically stated, we'll put it in layman's terms, that they are creating a new group, getting rid of the UAP task force, and creating the AOI MSG. Now, sure, that sounds like a spice that you would put on food, but no. Has everything to do with UFOs. And in that report, the military basically said, we're going to cover what's happening in airspace. We are going to investigate these sightings, these encounters, these close encounters, try and figure out what these craft are. So, Senator Gillibrand and everybody else who is worrying about this in the U.S. Senate or the Congress, you don't need to worry about it. We got you covered. But don't worry, elected officials. We're not going to give you any information whatsoever. Whatsoever. Now, elected officials like Senator Gillibrand and now Congressman Tim Burchett are speaking up against the military, saying, whoa, 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 people. We're the ones who are giving you the taxpayer dollars. We are the ones who are asking for some accountability on this subject. We, as the American people, have a right to know about what is going on in our airways, in our skies. Are we safe? Are we allowed to feel that we are not in trouble or in any sort of danger? Because, the threat narrative plays well with any time the U.S. military wants money. In my opinion, this is the first time that we are actually seeing publicly a tete-a-tete between the military-industrial complex and elected officials, by the people, for the people. And it's all over UFOs. The most recent one to step into this foray is Tim Burchett. Now, for people who were listening earlier this fall to the Big Phone Home 2, put on by Lou Jimenez and his UCR group, the Unidentified Celebrity Review, on YouTube, you would know that Congressman Burchett actually called in and said he wants to know what's going on, that we have the right to know what's going on. We have a need to know what's going on. Well, Congressman Burchett has literally dropped the gloves, using a hockey term, because I am Canadian after all, on this entire subject. Let me quote here for a second. The Tennessee congressman doesn't want this new agency by the Pentagon to start up. He's not happy about it because it means less transparency. In Burchett's eyes, the Pentagon is only going to keep asking for more and more funding from Congress without giving up the goods on what they know about UFOs, and the House members thinks this is going down a road that is just plain foolish. It's true. It's totally true. This is why we see even people like Luis Elizondo and Chris Mellon being called out by the Pentagon, basically telling them, shut up, guys. Your opinion doesn't matter. So what did they do? They took to Twitter, UFO Twitter, and publicly to get the message out saying, hey, call your congresspeople, call your senators, let's get this going. Because there is a war on the UFO front. It just doesn't involve aliens just yet. Now, the interesting part about this, because I am a media guy too, is the mainstream media really hasn't picked this up. Some have. Papers like The Hill, Politico, even TMZ. But where is this on the front page headlines of every major newspaper in the United States? You literally have the United States military and the Pentagon telling elected officials you do not have a right to know about UAP and what we find out about it. Now, I don't know about any other journalists out there, but it has my spidey senses kind of tingling a little bit, saying, there's a story here, and a major story. The military-industrial complex, ever since President Eisenhower warned the American public about it back in the 1950s, has literally been in control of everything that happens. The United States government spends more than the next 28 countries on military and defense annually, including Russia in that list. And when you look at what they have accomplished with technology, it's phenomenal. Going back to the days of the SR-71 and U-2, followed up by the F-117 stealth fighter, the B-2 bomber, the B-1 bomber, the F-22, the F-35. Some will call the latter not very successful and extremely expensive. But they keep pushing technology forward. This is why the military-industrial complex does not want to give up its secrets. And the military knows that the media is not going to have any stories on this. They're not going to press the stories, even though every American right now should be outraged that they are telling the public, you do not have a right to know. They are telling the U.S. elected officials, we don't care what you think or what you may vote on. You're not getting any information. Dangerous, isn't it, when you think about it that way? If this subject wasn't about UFOs, it would be top priority for every media outlet out there. But because it is UFOs, and this subject has been a barren wasteland for decades for the media, they have zero interest in covering it, for the most part. This story needs to come out, whatever way possible. And I will be the first one to say that I was not a fan of any sort of narrative that we saw since the beginning of the To the Stars Academy. And Lord knows we could talk ad nauseum about that. But this new wave of information that is being blocked by the Pentagon is incredulous. And if you're American, you should be outraged. You should be calling your senators, writing them emails. You should be calling your congresspeople. Because the military in the U.S. has just given every civilian, including elected officials, the middle finger. We don't know what UFOs are. We could only assume. We don't know what the United States government truly knows about this. Because people like Luis Elizondo and others, they are so embedded in their non-disclosure agreements that we'll never know the truth. But the stories are out there. The information is out there, and probably the crash retrievals and the alien bodies are out there. We can no longer deny this, even though the U.S. military wants us to. We need to know the story. We're big boys and girls now. We can handle it, so we think. But just like Jack Nicholson, they are screaming and berating, you can't handle the truth, even though we want the truth. Doesn't that make you think that the military has their own UFO Pandora's box that they don't want opened? Maybe they have worked with aliens at Area 51 or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or Dugway or Dulce. Maybe Bob Lazar's story is true. Maybe David Adair's story is true. Maybe Eisenhower meeting with aliens in the early 50s is true. What else are they hiding? How many crash retrievals do they have from around the world, not just on U.S. soil? How about crash retrievals from Canada, Mexico? There's word that there could possibly be one that happened in Russia from a long time ago when it was the Cold War. What about their astronauts? People keep making fun of us who believe in this topic as tinfoilers. We now know where that story is coming from. It's coming from the military. It is coming from the Pentagon. And because the media doesn't want this story, it's coming from them as well. And the military and the Pentagon and the alphabet agencies, they are playing each and every one of us like fools because they know the answer. They know what it's all about. And yet, they're going to keep teasing us giving us little tidbits of cheese when we're hungry, less than can feed a rat. Because we are the rats to them. And they do not want us to be feeding off of their information. They want this back under the rug where they feel it belongs. Because when it's back under the rug, nobody talks about it. When nobody talks about it, nobody asks questions. When nobody asks questions, they get to play with all of the fancy toys that the aliens are dropping off. What if contact is about to be made? Do we know? Is that part of the secret? Because up until 4 or 5 years ago, there was really no reason for this topic to go mainstream like it has. And the only thing that we could sit here and do is shrug our shoulders, say, well, that's a little bit different. That's interesting. We know something is happening. We know there's information going on. We know there are scientists working on this technology. What we don't know is where it's happening, how it's happening, why it's happening, and where did the technology come from. Sure, we could hear people say, oh, they're interdimensional, they're from a different timeline, they're from inner Earth, they're from outer space. We really don't know. We could only assume, but the American government may know. The United States military surely knows. And they are going to keep it as secret as possible. They're telling the politicians right now, hey, go take your money and become rich from your lobbyists. Or do you remember how many contracts that your state has to build military products? Let's remember that. We don't need more politicians like Harry Reid coming out way after the fact. What the American public needs right now is they need more Tim Burchetts and Senator Gillibrands stepping up to the plate and saying, tell us what we need to know. Because this is still the question that affects every single person on this planet. Not every American, all 7.8 billion of us. And that is your Dave 101. All right, let's get to Shirky Poo's news tonight. Starting off in UFOs, according to two former Department of Defense officials, the Pentagon, the Pentagon again, office recently tasked with assessing U.S. military encounters with UFOs, is woefully ill-equipped and improperly staffed to tackle its new mission. Moreover, the initiative threatens to derail a congressional proposal that would mandate unprecedented government transparency on UFOs. Lou Elizondo, the former head of the Informal Defense Department unit that assessed military UFO reports, states that he has had deep conversations about the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, that's OUSDI and S, leading a government effort to investigate the phenomenon. According to Elizondo, UFOs are not solely an intelligence issue. If we want 70 more years of secrecy on this topic, the OUSDI is the perfect place to put it. They've had 4 years so far. What we have little in the way of efforts serving meeting the public interest. Thank you, Lou, for calling it out. I love that he's becoming a little bit of a media jerk and a thorn in the side of the government here. I like this new Lou. New Lou is cool. He seems like he's one of us. One of those badass uncles that you call on over when the bully at school shoves you down in the school hallways. Yeah, he's that guy. Uncle Lou. Let's call him Uncle Lou from now on. I can't say much about experiences as an intelligence officer, according to the writer here, Eric Hazeltine, PhD. But I'm going to read it in his term. But one thing I can say is I constantly got the question from friends, are UFOs real? My answer was usually an enigmatic smile, which implied I knew more than I could say, but which in reality covered up the total ignorance of the subject. UFOs, ETs, alien abductions, and visitations were not simply subjects of the intelligence community or what they cared about, despite the public's occasional obsession. But now, everybody's looking. Everybody's looking. including Eric. Thank you, Eric Hazeltine, for your duty. Here's a cool one. A comet will fly in the sky around Christmas. And we're not talking about Santa's reindeer here, but keep your eyes out for the giant ice ball called Comet Leonard that is soon to become increasingly visible from Earth through the months of December as it heads towards the sun. Named after astronomer Greg Leonard, who discovered it in early January of this year, the comet is expected to sweep closest to Earth on December 12th, becoming viewable for space spectators watching from below. This comet will fly in the early morning sky, but is visible in the evening as well, similar to Neowise, which I never got to see. Leonard is considered a much-anticipated comet that is likely to be 2021's best comet and its brightest comet by year's end, according to earthsky.org. That is very cool. All right, let's get to another one here. All right, breastfeeding in public. I have zero problem with this. Zero. A mother should be able to feed her child anywhere, especially her baby. Little older children, a little weird at that point. But a woman who took a Delta flight recently wasn't kidding around when she whipped out her boobs and started feeding her hairless cat. Hairless cat. The unidentified female from Syracuse flew down to Atlanta, where she was caught breastfeeding her feline on the plane. A flight attendant told her repeatedly to stop and put her cat back in its cage. However, the woman refused. A message was sent through the aircraft communications addressing and reporting system to alert Delta crew in Atlanta that a passenger seat 13A is breastfeeding a cat and will not put the cat back in its carrier when the flight attendant requested. A photo of the message was found on Reddit, posted on Twitter. Flight attendant Ainsley Elizabeth, who was on board during the incident, took to TikTok on November 13th to explain what went down. This woman had one of those hairless cats swaddled up in a blanket so it looked like a baby. Her shirt was up and she was trying to have the cat latch onto her, and she wouldn't put the cat back in the cage. And the cat was screaming for its life. My goodness, torturing the poor kitty. Elizabeth revealed in another video that security got involved. However, she was unsure of what happened to the woman once her cat and her touched down with the jet in Atlanta. The Delta employee who sent the ICAR's message also requested that Delta's Redcoat team apprehend the woman once they got to the ground. Redcoats are the elite airport's customer service experts, identifiable by their bright red coats. They are specially trained to handle on-the-stop customer issues, including ones that try to breastfeed their cat on an airplane. There are some sick people out here, man. Sick people. I don't get it. Shirky Poo, where do you find these stories sometimes? Breastfeeding a cat on a plane? It's terrible. Who does that? Oh my gosh. Let's wrap this thing up, man. Thank you, Shirky Poo, for the news. Thank you to everybody listening to Dave 101 and to Stephen Ward for coming on in and kicking some butt talking Mothman and Dogman all night long. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw rocking in the background with Little Brothers watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your car, wherever you're breastfeeding your cat tonight. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms on YouTube, Twitch, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we're watching. We own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo Train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night. Be careful with your cats. Good night.
From HBO's Insecure and executive producer Issa Rae comes a new satirical true crime podcast, We Stay Looking. After investigating the disappearance of a missing Black woman in Looking for LaToya, Terry J. Vaughn is back as citizen sleuth Rose Cranberry. Through comedy, We Stay Looking sheds light on the serious issues of systemic racism within the media and the criminal justice system. Produced by Radio and Tenderfoot TV with HBO, We Stay Looking is available December 8th on all podcast platforms. You can binge the entire season early, December 1st on HBO Max.
When it comes to learning, your kids' favorites from Paw Patrol and Blue's Clues are Noggin, a learning app designed to help kids build math and literacy skills. Claim a limited-time holiday offer of 99 cents a month plus taxes for 3 months at noggin.com/iHeart. $7.99 a month plus taxes until you cancel after free trial ends. Visit noggin.com for terms and conditions.